The stage disappeared into the desert heat, taking everything she owned, her trunk, her money, her only way out of Silver Creek. Evelyn Hartwell stood alone on that dusty Arizona street, abandoned by fate itself. Then a shadow fell across her tears. A cowboy on a chestnut horse, hat tilted against the sun, spoke words that would change her life forever. "Ride with me." What happened next became the legend whispered in every saloon from Tucson to Tombstone. Stay with me until the end and comment what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The Arizona Territory had a way of breaking people. It didn't matter if you came with dreams sewn into your dress hem or gold coins hidden in your boot heel. The desert took what it wanted, and it rarely asked permission. Evelyn Hartwell learned this lesson on a Tuesday morning in August 1878, standing in the middle of Silver Creek's main street with dust settling on her shoulders and tears carving lines through the grit on her cheeks. The stagecoach, her stagecoach, was already a quarter-mile gone, shrinking into the heat shimmer that made the horizon dance like water. She could still see it, that blessed Concord coach with the red wheels and the Wells Fargo lettering, carrying her trunk, her teaching certificate, her life savings of $47, and every last thread of hope she'd managed to weave together after the fire took her father's mercantile in St. Louis. Gone. All of it. Because she'd stepped into the general store for one final purchase, a tin of tooth powder that the proprietor swore she'd need in the rough country ahead, and the store owner, a rail-thin man named Silas Pettigrew, with breath like rotted meat, had locked the door behind her. "Stage leaves in 5 minutes, miss," he'd said, blocking her path with his body. "Plenty of time for a pretty thing like you to be sociable." She'd tried to push past him. His hand had caught her wrist. "I said, sociable." What happened next came in fragments, the way trauma always did. The crack of her reticule against his temple. She'd packed it with her father's watch, heavy and brass. Pettigrew stumbling back, cursing. The door finally opening. Her bursting into the street just in time to see the stage driver crack his whip and the 6-horse team lunge forward, wheels spinning, passengers' faces in the windows already turning away from Silver Creek and toward Tucson, toward Phoenix, toward anywhere but this godforsaken way station dying slowly in the copper mining country. "Wait!" she'd screamed, running. "Wait, please!" But drivers on the Butterfield line didn't wait. Waiting got you killed by Apache raiders or road agents or any of the 100 other dangers that made the Arizona run the deadliest in the territory. The schedule mattered more than mercy. The stage left at 10 o'clock, and if you weren't aboard when the driver released the brake, you got left behind. Simple as that. Now Evelyn stood in the center of a street that was really just a wide spot in the wagon road, watching her future disappear into a plume of dust that hung in the air like a funeral shroud. The August sun hammered down with the weight of God's own anvil. Sweat trickled down her spine beneath her traveling dress, dark blue wool, completely wrong for the climate, but the only decent thing she owned. Her corset squeezed her ribs until breathing felt like work. Her button-up boots, so sensible in Missouri, were already raising blisters on her heels. She wanted to scream. She wanted to collapse right there in the dirt and sob until the earth swallowed her whole. Instead, she stood very still, clutching the crumpled stage ticket in her hand. Useless now, just a piece of paper worth nothing, and tried to remember how to think. Silver Creek wasn't really a town. It was barely a settlement. 24 buildings scattered along the road like dice thrown by a careless hand. The stage station, a livery stable, a general store, a saloon called the Lucky Strike, a few adobe houses baking in the sun, and a scattering of tents and brush arbors where the miners and drifters made their temporary homes. The kind of place that existed only because the stage needed to change horses, and because the silver vein in the hills hadn't yet played out. The kind of place where a woman alone attracted the wrong kind of attention. Already she could feel eyes on her. Men lounging in the shade of the saloon porch, watching. A freighter adjusting his team's harness, staring. 2 miners emerging from the assay office, their conversation dying as they noticed her standing there, abandoned and vulnerable as a newborn calf. Evelyn's throat tightened. She had $3.20 in her pocket. The change from purchasing the tooth powder she'd never even retrieved from Pettigrew's counter. She had the clothes on her back. She had a small handbag containing a handkerchief, a pencil, and a leather-bound copy of Whitman's Leaves of Grass that her father had given her on her 16th birthday. She had nothing else. The next stage wouldn't come through for 3 days. She couldn't afford lodging for 3 days. She couldn't even afford a meal. And the men watching her knew it, the same way vultures knew when something was dying. "You all right, miss?" The voice came from behind her, and Evelyn spun, her heart hammering. But it was just the station master, an older man with mutton-chop whiskers and kind eyes that looked tired of witnessing small tragedies. Her voice cracked. She swallowed hard, forced steel into her spine. "I missed the stage." "I saw." He shook his head. "Pettigrew again?" She nodded, not trusting herself to speak. The station master spat in the dirt, a gesture of pure disgust. "That man's going to answer for his ways one of these days. You got people in Tucson? Someone who can wire you money for the next coach?" "No." The word came out barely above a whisper. "Family anywhere?" "Dead. All of them." The station master's face softened with the particular sympathy that told her he'd heard this story before, knew how it usually ended. "I'm sorry, miss. Truly. But I can't let you stay at the station without a ticket, company, policy. And 3 nights in town..." He trailed off, but they both knew what he meant. 3 nights alone in Silver Creek would destroy whatever was left of her reputation. Might destroy more than that. "I understand," Evelyn said, though she didn't, not really. "How did you understand the moment your life came apart? How did you make sense of the universe's casual cruelty?" The station master pressed 2 bits into her hand, a $quarter that felt both generous and completely insufficient. "Mary at the boarding house might give you a corner to sleep in for that. Tell her I sent you. And miss?" He lowered his voice. "You seem like a good girl, a smart girl. Whatever you do, don't go into the Lucky Strike looking for work. Promise me." She promised, though she had no idea what other options existed. Then she was alone again, standing in the street with the sun beating down and the taste of copper. Fear, she realized, the taste of pure fear, coating her tongue. "Think," she commanded herself. "Father taught you to think." But thinking required hope, and hope was getting harder to find. That's when she heard the hoofbeats. Not the thunder of a stage team or the clatter of a freight wagon, but the steady, purposeful rhythm of a single horse moving at an easy lope. The sound grew closer, and Evelyn looked up to see a rider coming down the main street, approaching from the east. He sat his horse like he was born to the saddle, easy and relaxed, moving with the animal's gait rather than against it. The horse itself was something special, a chestnut stallion with a white blaze and stockings, its coat gleaming like polished copper even under the dust of travel. Good bloodlines, she thought automatically, remembering her father's brief, failed venture into horse trading. Spanish barb ancestry, probably, mixed with something bigger. But it was the man who held her attention. He was tall. She could tell even mounted, with broad shoulders and the lean, hard build of someone who lived in the saddle. He wore the working uniform of the frontier, canvas trousers tucked into scuffed boots, a faded blue shirt open at the collar, a leather vest darkened with sweat and wear. Gun belt slung low on his hips, a Colt Peacemaker riding in a holster that had been shaped to its owner's draw, a bandana around his neck dust-stained, leather gloves that had seen better days. But it was his face, shadowed beneath a wide-brimmed hat with a Montana crease, that caught her breath. Not handsome, exactly. Too weathered for that, too marked by sun and wind and whatever hard years had shaped him. Maybe 30, maybe older. It was hard to tell with men who lived outside. He had a strong jaw, dark with stubble, a straight nose that might have been broken once, and eyes that she couldn't quite make out beneath the hat's brim, but that seemed to take in everything. The street, the watching men, the abandoned woman standing in the dust with tears drying on her face. He reined in his horse about 10 feet from where she stood. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The horse shifted its weight, and leather creaked. Somewhere down the street, a door slammed. In the hills beyond town, a crow called out, harsh and mocking. Then the rider reached up and tipped his hat back, and Evelyn saw his eyes. Gray. Clear as creek water, and just as cold at first glance. But there was something else there too, something that made her breath catch despite her fear. Recognition, maybe. Not of her specifically, but of her situation. Like he'd seen this scene before, understood exactly what was happening and what it meant. "Ma'am," he said, and his voice was like his face, weathered, worn smooth by use, but somehow kind beneath the rough edges. "You look like you could use some help." Evelyn's first instinct was to refuse. Pride, that old enemy, rose up in her throat. She was Evelyn Hartwell, daughter of Thomas Hartwell, educated in St. Louis's finest schools, fluent in 3 languages, capable of discussing Shakespeare and mathematics with equal facility. She didn't need charity from dusty cowboys. But pride was a luxury, and she'd just lost her last dollar of luxury funds. "The stage left without me," she said, hating how small her voice sounded. "I saw." He shifted in the saddle, and she noticed how naturally he moved, like the horse was part of his body. "Pettigrew?" She blinked. "How did you—" "Ain't the first time he's pulled that trick. Son of a bitch has been running that game since he took over the store last spring." The cowboy's jaw tightened. "He hurt you?" "No, I hit him with my handbag." The corner of his mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but close. "Good. He'll have a headache to remember you by." Then the almost smile faded. "But that doesn't solve your problem, does it?" "No." "Next stage is 3 days out." "Yes." "You got money for lodging?" Evelyn lifted her chin, clinging to the last shreds of dignity. "I'll manage." "Ma'am, forgive me for being blunt, but you won't. This town's got maybe 5 decent people in it, and the rest are the kind who'll see a woman in trouble and think, opportunity." He said it matter of fact, without drama, which somehow made it worse. "You can't stay here." "I don't have a choice." "Yes, you do." He reached down and patted the stallion's neck. "I'm heading south, down toward Fort Bowie, and then on to Tucson." "You need to get to Tucson?" Yes. I have a teaching position waiting in Tucson, near Tucson." He nodded slowly, processing this information. "That's about 70 miles south-southwest, 2 days' ride if we push, 3 if we don't kill the horse." The implications of what he was suggesting crashed over her like a wave. Ride. With him. A stranger. Alone across 70 miles of hostile territory where Apache raiders and road agents made even the stage routes dangerous. It was insane. It was also, possibly, her only option. "I don't know you," she said carefully. "I don't even know your name." "Colt Merriman." He touched the brim of his hat, a gesture that seemed more instinct than manners. "Scout for the Army sometimes. Courier. Guide for folks who need one. Been working this territory for 6 years, and I've got a reputation you can ask about if we had time for you to do the asking. But we don't. You need to decide now, Miss Hartwell. Evelyn Hartwell. Miss Hartwell." His eyes held hers, and she saw something there that made her want to trust him. A steadiness. A quality of being exactly who he appeared to be. Nothing hidden. "I'm not going to lie and tell you it's safe. Nothing in the territory's safe, but I know the country. I know how to move through it quiet, and I give you my word, on my mother's grave and my father's name, that I'll get you to Tucson alive and unmolested. Your virtue's your own, and it'll stay that way. All I'm offering is a ride and some protection along the way." "Why?" The question burst out before she could stop it. "Why help me? You don't know me. I can't pay you. I have nothing to offer." Colt Merriman was quiet for a moment, and something moved behind his eyes. Some old memory, some private pain. When he spoke, his voice was softer. "Let's just say, I know what it's like to be stranded somewhere, counting on help that never comes. And I know what it's like to get that help when you need it most." He straightened in the saddle. "I can't make you trust me, Miss Hartwell, but that stage is gone. This town's no good, and the sun's getting higher. You need to decide." Evelyn looked around Silver Creek one more time, saw the men still watching from the saloon porch, saw the door to Pettigrew's store, closed tight, saw the stage road stretching south toward the mountains, empty and forbidding. She thought about her father, dead 6 months now, and what he would say. She thought about the teaching position waiting in Tucson, the chance to start over that was slipping away with every passing moment. She thought about the alternative. 3 days in Silver Creek, sleeping in corners, dodging hands and propositions, watching her hope drain away like water into sand. Then she looked up at Colt Merriman, at his weathered face and steady eyes, and made a choice that would change everything. "All right," she said quietly. "I'll ride with you." Something flickered across his face. Relief, maybe, or approval. He swung down from the saddle in one fluid motion, and she realized he was even taller than she'd thought, easily 6 feet. Up close, she could see more details. The scar that cut through his left eyebrow, the sun lines around his eyes, the way his gun sat loose in its holster like it belonged there. "You ever ridden much, Miss Hartwell?" "Some. When I was younger, side saddle." "Well, you'll be riding astride today, and you'll be riding behind me. Horse won't carry double for long, but we'll spell him when we can. You afraid of horses?" "No?" "Good." He turned to his stallion, running a hand down the animal's neck. "This is Copper. He's got a good temperament, but he doesn't know you, so move slow and let him get your scent." Evelyn approached carefully, extending her hand. The horse snuffled at her palm, then accepted her touch. His coat was warm beneath her fingers, and she felt some of her terror ease. Horses, she understood. Horses made sense. "We need to get you out of that dress," Colt said. And when her eyes widened, he quickly added, "I mean, that wool's going to cook you before we get 5 miles. You got anything cooler?" "Everything I own was in my trunk, on the stage." He nodded, thinking. "All right, we'll stop at the store, get you some canvas pants and a shirt." "I can't. I don't have enough money." "I do. Consider it an investment in making sure you don't die of heat stroke before we reach Fort Bowie." He saw her about to protest and held up a hand. "You can pay me back when you get your teaching salary. I trust you're good for it." There was no mockery in his tone, no condescension, just a statement of fact, as if trusting her was the most natural thing in the world. "Wait here," he said, and strode toward Pettigrew's store. Evelyn watched him go, her heart hammering. What was she doing? She was about to ride off into the wilderness with a man she'd met 5 minutes ago, a man with a gun and scars and eyes that had seen things she couldn't imagine. It was madness, but the alternative was madder still. Colt emerged from the store carrying a bundle, canvas trousers, a cotton shirt, a straw hat with a wide brim. Pettigrew appeared in the doorway behind him, and Evelyn saw him reach for Colt's shoulder. What happened next took less than a second. Colt turned, and somehow his Colt peacemaker was in his hand, cocked and pressed against Pettigrew's forehead before the store owner's fingers made contact. "Don't." Colt's voice was flat, dead calm, more frightening than any shout. "You put your hands on me, and I'll decorate this street with what's left of your brains. You understand?" Pettigrew, suddenly gray-faced, nodded jerkily. "Good." Colt holstered the gun in the same smooth motion he'd drawn it. "And that bill I just paid? Consider it compensation for what you tried with Miss Hartwell this morning. You see her again, you cross the street. You hear me?" Another nod. "Speak up." "Yes," Pettigrew croaked. "I hear you." "Excellent." Colt touched his hat brim, a gesture of pure mockery. "Always a pleasure doing business." He walked back to where Evelyn stood, handed her the bundle. "There's a brush arbor behind the livery where you can change. I'll wait here with the horse." She took the clothes, her hands trembling slightly, not from fear of Colt, but from the sudden visceral understanding of the violence he was capable of. That draw, that speed. She'd heard about gunfighters, read about them in the penny dreadfuls that made their way west. But seeing it in person was different. "Mr. Merriman, just Colt, ma'am." "Colt, are you a dangerous man?" He looked at her with those clear gray eyes and didn't insult her with a lie. "Yes, ma'am, I am. To people who need killing, but you're not one of those people, so you've got nothing to fear from me." He glanced toward the saloon, where the watchers were starting to lose interest now that she clearly had protection. "Now go change. We're losing daylight." The clothes fit reasonably well. A bit large, but better than wool in the August heat. She had to roll the pants cuffs and cinch the belt tight, but when she emerged from behind the livery wearing canvas and cotton, her dark hair pinned up under the straw hat, she felt lighter, freer, more ready for what came next. Colt gave her an appraising look. "Better? You'll pass for a ranch hand at a distance, which is what we want. Less attention we draw, the safer we are." He swung back into the saddle, then extended his hand down to her. "Step on my boot and swing up behind me. Put your arms around my waist and hold on. You start to slip, you squeeze tight, and let me know." Evelyn hesitated, staring at his outstretched hand. This was it. The moment of commitment. Once she took his hand, climbed onto that horse, there was no going back. She thought of the stage, disappearing into the dust. She thought of her father's last words. "Be brave, Evie. The world's hard on women, but you're harder than you know." She took Colt Merriman's hand. His grip was strong, calloused, sure. She stepped onto his boot, and he pulled her up behind him with easy strength. The saddle was hard beneath her, unfamiliar, but his body in front of her was solid and warm, something to hold on to in a world that had suddenly lost all other anchors. "Ready?" he asked over his shoulder. "No," she said honestly, "but let's go anyway." She felt more than heard his chuckle, a rumble deep in his chest. Then he touched his heels to Copper's sides, and the horse moved forward, walking at first, then breaking into an easy trot as they left Silver Creek behind. Evelyn looked back once, saw the ramshackle buildings, the watching men, the stage station where her old life had ended. Then she turned forward, wrapped her arms around Colt Merriman's waist, and held on as they rode south into the vast and dangerous country that would either kill them or set them free. The sun climbed higher. The desert opened before them, red rock and sparse grassland and mountains in the purple distance. And with every mile that passed beneath Copper's hooves, Evelyn felt something unexpected stirring in her chest. Not just relief, not just fear. Hope. The stubborn, irrational hope that maybe, just maybe, being left behind by that stage was the best thing that ever happened to her. The worst, certainly, but also, somehow, the best. The first hour passed in silence, broken only by the rhythmic thud of Copper's hooves and the creak of saddle leather. Evelyn held on to Colt's waist with a grip that started desperate and gradually, cautiously, relaxed into something merely firm. The heat pressed down like a physical weight, and she was grateful now for the canvas pants and cotton shirt, though sweat still trickled down her spine and gathered at her temples beneath the straw hat. The land around them was nothing like Missouri. No green fields, no tree-lined streams, no softness anywhere. Just rust-colored earth studded with creosote bush and prickly pear, punctuated by stands of ocotillo that reached toward the sky like skeletal fingers. In the distance, mountains rose in layers of purple and brown, their peaks sharp against the brutal blue of the sky. Everything looked ancient, indifferent, capable of killing you without malice or meaning. It was beautiful in a way that terrified her. "You doing all right back there?" Colt's voice startled her from her thoughts. "Yes, how much farther?" "To where?" "Fort Bowie's about 40 miles. We won't make it today. We'll camp tonight, push on tomorrow. If we're lucky and don't run into trouble, we'll reach the fort by tomorrow evening. And if we're not lucky?" She felt his shrug through the fabric of his shirt. "Then we deal with whatever comes. That's all you can do out here." Another silence settled between them. Evelyn watched the landscape roll past, trying not to think about what whatever comes might mean. Apache raiders, outlaws, rattlesnakes, flash floods in the arroyos. 100 ways to die that the penny dreadfuls never quite captured, because the real terror wasn't in the dramatic moments, but in the slow, grinding awareness that nature here didn't care whether you lived or died. "Can I ask you something?" she said finally. "Sure. Why were you in Silver Creek? You said you're a scout for the Army sometimes. Were you on duty?" "Nope, just passing through on my way back from a courier run up to Globe. Delivered some dispatches, picked up my pay, figured I'd head south and see if the Army needed any tracking work done." He paused. "Lucky timing, I guess. For me, certainly. For both of us, maybe. Gets lonely, riding solo all the time." The admission surprised her. She'd imagined men like him preferred solitude, chose it deliberately. "You don't have family, friends?" "Had family once, long time ago." His voice went flat in a way that told her not to push. "As for friends, I've got a few scattered around the territory. But most folks I know are either dead, moved on, or decided they'd rather not associate with someone in my line of work." "What exactly is your line of work? You said scout, but I've also got a reputation as a gun hand, and you're wondering which one's the real job." He guided Copper around a wash where water had carved deep ruts in the earth during some past storm. "Truth is, it's both. I track for the Army when they need someone who knows Apache sign and can move quiet through rough country. I've also been known to hire out my gun when the cause is right and the money's fair. Never killed a man who didn't need killing, if that's what you're asking. How many men have you killed? The question hung in the air between them for a long moment. She almost took it back, almost apologized, but something in her needed to know. Needed to understand exactly who she'd trusted her life to. Enough, Colt said quietly. More than I wanted to, fewer than I might have if I'd made different choices. First one was when I was 17, a claim jumper who shot my partner in the back up in Colorado. I killed him, and I didn't feel bad about it then, and I don't feel bad about it now. Man had it coming. He shifted in the saddle. But I won't lie to you, Miss Hartwell. Taking a life changes you. Doesn't matter if it's justified. Every man I've killed is still with me in some way. I see their faces sometimes when I'm trying to sleep. Evelyn was quiet, absorbing this. Do you see yourself as a good man? I see myself as a man who tries to do right more often than wrong. Some days I succeed, some days I don't. That's the best answer I can give you. It was, she realized, an honest answer, more honest than the comfortable lies she'd heard from supposedly respectable men back in St. Louis, men who hid their cruelties behind manners and money. For what it's worth, she said softly, I think you're a good man, Colt Merriman. You didn't have to stop for me back there. You could have ridden right past. Yeah, but then I'd have had to live with myself, and that's getting harder the older I get. He glanced back at her, and she saw the ghost of a smile. Besides, seemed like you needed help, and I was in a position to give it. Sometimes it's that simple. They rode on. The sun climbed higher, then began its slow descent toward the western horizon. The land changed gradually, the flat desert giving way to rolling hills dotted with juniper and pinon. They passed a burned-out ranch house, its adobe walls blackened by fire, and Colt's hand went to his rifle without him seeming to think about it. Apache? Evelyn asked, her voice barely a whisper. Maybe. Or bandits, or just bad luck with a cooking fire. No way to know. He scanned the hills around them, eyes constantly moving. This is Chiricahua country. Cochise kept the peace for a while before he died, but his son Taza doesn't have the same control. Younger warriors are restless, and they've got cause to be. The government keeps breaking promises, pushing them off their land. Can't really blame them for fighting back. But they'll kill us if they find us. Probably not. I've got some history with the Chiricahua. Rode with a scout named Tom Jeffords for a while, and he taught me enough of their language to get by. I've traded with them, hunted with them, sat at their fires. They know me as someone who keeps his word and doesn't treat them like animals. He paused. That said, if we run into a war party that's fresh from a fight with the cavalry, all bets are off. They won't stop to ask questions, and I won't have time to explain. That's not particularly reassuring. Wasn't trying to reassure you, was trying to be honest. He pointed toward a cluster of rocks ahead, where a few scraggly cottonwoods marked the presence of water. We'll rest there, let Copper drink. You should walk around, stretch your legs. Long time yet before we camp for the night. The spring was barely worthy of the name, just a seep in the rocks that formed a small pool about 2 feet across. But the water was clear, and Copper drank gratefully while Colt loosened the saddle cinch and checked the horse's hooves for stones. Evelyn wandered a short distance away, her legs stiff from riding, and found a relatively flat rock to sit on. The silence of the desert was profound. No bird calls, no insect hum, just the whisper of wind through the rocks and the occasional stamp of Copper's hoof. It was the kind of silence that made you aware of your own heartbeat, your own breathing, the tiny sounds of your body moving through space. Here, Colt appeared beside her, holding out a canteen and what looked like a strip of dried meat. Drink slow, eat slower. Jerky's tough, but it'll keep you going. She took both gratefully. The water was warm and tasted of metal, but it was wet. The jerky was indeed tough, requiring serious work with her teeth, but it had a surprisingly pleasant smoky flavor. What kind of meat is this? Venison. Shot a mule deer last week, cut it into strips and dried it. Good trail food. Doesn't spoil, doesn't weigh much, keeps you fed. He sat down on a nearby rock, pulled out his own piece of jerky. You're doing better than I expected, Miss Hartwell. What did you expect? Tears, maybe. Complaints about the heat, the discomfort. Most city women I've guided, which, granted, isn't many, spend the first day in misery and the second day swearing they're going to die. I might still get there, Evelyn said. The day's not over. He smiled at that, a genuine smile that transformed his weathered face into something almost boyish. Fair enough, but so far you're holding up fine. They sat in companionable silence for a few minutes, chewing their jerky and watching Copper nose around the spring looking for grass that wasn't there. Evelyn found herself studying Colt from the corner of her eye, the way he sat so still, like the rocks around them, but with an alertness that never quite left, the way his eyes constantly scanned the landscape, not anxious, but watchful, the way his hand rested near his gun without actually touching it. "You fought in the war," she said suddenly, not sure where the certainty came from. He looked at her sharply. "What makes you say that?" "The way you move, the way you watch things. My father had friends who'd been soldiers. They all had that same quality. Like part of them was always still on the battlefield." Colt was quiet for a long moment, his jaw working on the jerky. When he finally spoke, his voice was distant. "Yeah, I fought. Joined up when I was 16, lied about my age, rode with the Union cavalry out of Kansas, saw action at Wilson's Creek, Pea Ridge, Prairie Grove. By the time I was 18, I'd seen enough death to last most men 3 lifetimes. Is that when you came west?" "After the war ended, yeah. Couldn't go back to what I'd been before, and I didn't fit in the peacetime army, so I drifted. Ended up in Colorado during the gold rush, tried my hand at mining, realized I was better suited to keeping miners alive than digging for color. Started scouting, guiding, doing courier work. Eventually made my way down here to Arizona, and the territory just suited me. Because it's violent? Because it's honest." He met her eyes. "Out here, things are what they are. A man's worth what he can do, not what he owns or what family he comes from. If you're no good, the desert finds you out quick. If you're tough and you're smart and you're willing to work, you can make a life." That appealed to me. Evelyn nodded slowly, understanding more than he'd said. "And there's no one back wherever you came from, wondering where you are? No sweetheart waiting?" "There was once. Girl named Sarah back in Kansas. Prettiest thing I'd ever seen and sweet as honey besides. We were talking about getting married before I went off to war." His expression darkened. "I came back different, harder. She tried, bless her, but she couldn't live with what I'd become. Married a banker's son 6 months after I left for Colorado. Last I heard, she had 3 kids and a nice house in Topeka." "I'm sorry." "Don't be. She made the right choice. I wasn't fit to be anyone's husband then, and I'm probably not fit now. A woman deserves better than a man who can't sleep through the night without waking up reaching for his gun." The sadness in his voice caught at something in Evelyn's chest. "Maybe the right woman wouldn't mind," she said softly. Colt looked at her for a long moment, and something passed between them. Not romance, not yet, but recognition. The acknowledgement that they were both broken in their own ways, both scarred by losses they hadn't chosen. "Maybe," he said finally, "but I haven't met her yet." They finished their jerky in silence, then mounted up again. Evelyn settled behind Colt with slightly more confidence now, her arms around his waist feeling less like desperation and more like partnership. They rode on as the sun began its descent, painting the rocks gold and orange and deep crimson. The land grew rougher. They were climbing now, following game trails through stands of juniper that smelled sharp and clean. Copper picked his way carefully over rocky ground, never stumbling, and Evelyn began to appreciate the quality of the horse as much as the quality of the man who rode him. "We're coming up on Apache Pass," Colt said as they crested a ridge. Below them, a natural corridor cut through the mountains, a passage that looked like God had taken an axe to the rock. "This is contested ground. The Butterfield stage used to run through here, back before the war. Now it's too dangerous. We're going to move through quick and quiet, understand? No talking unless I talk first." Evelyn's heart kicked into a faster rhythm. "Are we likely to encounter anyone?" "Always possible. This pass has water, which means people use it. White, Apache, Mexican, doesn't matter. Everyone needs water." He loosened his rifle in its scabbard. "If something happens, you do exactly what I tell you, when I tell you. Don't argue, don't hesitate. Your life might depend on it." All right. I mean it, Miss Hartwell. Out here, being polite can get you killed. You follow orders first, we discuss them later. Agreed? The steel in his voice left no room for debate. Agreed. They descended into the pass as the shadows lengthened. The rock walls rose on either side, creating a sense of claustrophobia that made Evelyn's breath come shallow. Every boulder could hide an ambush. Every shadow could conceal a threat. She found herself pressing closer to Colt's back, drawing comfort from his steadiness. They were halfway through when Copper's ears pricked forward. Colt's hand went to his rifle. Easy, he murmured, though Evelyn wasn't sure if he was talking to her or the horse. He reined Copper to a stop, sitting perfectly still, listening. Then Evelyn heard it too, the sound of horses, multiple horses, moving through the rocks ahead of them. Don't move, Colt breathed. Don't even breathe loud. 3 riders emerged from behind a tumble of boulders about 50 yards ahead. Even at that distance, Evelyn could see they weren't white men. They wore breechclouts and high moccasins, their long dark hair bound back with cloth. 2 carried rifles, the third a bow with arrows and a quiver on his back. Their horses were smaller than Copper, tough little ponies that looked like they could run forever on nothing but air and determination. Apache. Evelyn's whole body went rigid with terror. She'd heard the stories. Everyone had heard the stories. The raids, the tortures, the settlers found dead in ways that made strong men sick. She waited for the warriors to raise their weapons, waited for the bullets or arrows that would end her life in this godforsaken pass. But Colt didn't reach for his gun. Instead, he raised his right hand, palm out, in what Evelyn recognized as a peace gesture. One of the Apache warriors, the one in the center, a man with a hard face and eyes like flint, returned the gesture, then said something in a language that sounded like water over stones, full of soft consonants and complex rhythms. Colt responded in the same language, his accent not perfect but clearly understandable. The conversation went back and forth for what felt like hours, but was probably less than a minute. Then Colt reached slowly into his saddlebag, pulled out a twist of tobacco and a folded trade blanket, and walked Copper forward with his hands visible and non-threatening. The lead warrior examined the offerings, nodded, said something else. Colt laughed, actually laughed, and replied. The warrior's stern expression softened slightly, and he gestured toward the pass ahead with his rifle. Colt touched his hat brim, turned Copper, and rode past the 3 Apache warriors at a walk, not hurrying, not showing fear. Evelyn didn't dare look at them directly, but she felt their eyes on her, assessing, calculating. Her heart hammered so hard she thought it might burst through her ribs. They were 100 yards past the warriors before Colt allowed Copper to increase his pace. Even then, he didn't gallop, just moved at a steady trot that ate up ground without looking like flight. They rode in silence for another half-mile before Evelyn found her voice. What did you say to them? Told them we were passing through, meant no harm, offered gifts as a courtesy. The leader, his name's Black Knife, I've met him before, asked where we were headed. I told him Fort Bowie. He said the pass was clear ahead, no soldiers, no trouble. Wished us good journey. That's all? She couldn't keep the disbelief from her voice. They just let us pass? They're not mindless savages, Miss Hartwell, no matter what the papers back east say. They're people protecting their land from an invasion, and they've got their own rules about who's an enemy and who's not. I've traded fairly with them, never broken my word, never killed any of their people. That counts for something. But they're at war with the whites, with the army, with some whites, with some army units. The Apache don't think in terms of big groups the way we do. They judge each person individually, each encounter on its own merits. Black Knife knows me, knows I'm not a threat to his people. So he let us pass. Colt glanced back at her. Besides, I gave him good tobacco and a blanket that's worth $3 in any trading post. That helps. Evelyn was silent, trying to reconcile what she'd just experienced with everything she'd been taught to believe about the savage Indians of the frontier. Those 3 men hadn't seemed savage. Dangerous, yes. Hard, certainly. But there'd been something almost courteous in the exchange, a mutual respect between warriors who understood each other. They cleared the pass as the sun touched the western mountains. The land opened up again, falling away toward a broad valley where grass grew in scattered clumps and a line of cottonwoods marked the course of a creek. Colt guided them down toward the water, constantly scanning the terrain, and finally stopped in a spot where boulders formed a natural windbreak and the creek curved to create a small, protected hollow. "We'll camp here," he said, swinging down from the saddle. "It's defensible. We've got water, and there's some graze for copper. Plus, anyone coming at us has to approach from 3 directions, all of them uphill." Evelyn dismounted less gracefully, her legs stiff and her rear end sore from hours in the saddle. She stumbled slightly, and Colt caught her elbow, steadying her. "First full day in the saddle's always the hardest," he said sympathetically. "Tomorrow will be worse, then the day after that you'll start to toughen up. Try to walk around a bit while I tend to the horse." She did, forcing her protesting muscles to move while Colt unsaddled Copper, rubbed the horse down with handfuls of grass, and checked his hooves and legs for any injuries. The care he took with the animal was striking, gentle, thorough, the kind of attention that spoke of genuine affection rather than just pragmatism. "You love that horse," she observed. "He saved my life at least 3 times that I can count. Man would be a fool not to love a horse like that." Colt finished his inspection, gave Copper a pat on the shoulder, and let him move off to the creek to drink. "Besides, he's better company than most people I know. Doesn't talk back, doesn't judge, never asks for more than he's able to give." High praise. It is, actually. He started gathering deadwood from beneath the cottonwoods. "I'm going to risk a small fire, just enough to boil coffee and warm up some beans. It'll be dark soon, and the smoke will dissipate before it draws attention. But we'll put it out before full dark, sleep cold." Evelyn helped him gather wood, and together they built a fire ring with stones from the creek. Colt produced a battered tin pot, filled it with water, and set it on rocks over the flames to boil. The smell of coffee soon filled the air, and Evelyn realized she was ravenously hungry. "Beans and hardtack," Colt said, handing her a tin plate with a dubious-looking meal. "Not fancy, but it'll fill your belly." She ate without complaint, too hungry to care about the quality. The beans were bland and the hardtack required significant jaw work, but combined with the strong, bitter coffee, it was the best meal she'd eaten in days. They sat on either side of the fire as the darkness gathered, not talking much, just existing in the comfortable silence of 2 people who'd been through something together. Stars emerged overhead, so many stars that they seemed to blur together into a river of light. Evelyn had never seen such a sky. The city lights of St. Louis had dimmed the heavens, made them seem distant and irrelevant. But here, with no civilization for miles, the universe revealed itself in all its terrifying vastness. "Makes you feel small, doesn't it?" Colt said softly, following her gaze. "All those stars, all that space, makes our problems seem pretty insignificant." "I don't find that comforting." "Neither do I, really, but it helps with perspective." He poured himself another cup of coffee. "You did good today, Miss Hartwell. Better than good. Most people fresh from the States would have panicked when those Apaches showed up. You kept your head." "I was terrified." "Being scared and panicking are different things. Scared keeps you alive. Panic gets you killed." He looked at her across the fire, his face half in shadow. "You've got steel in you. Your daddy raised you right." The mention of her father brought unexpected tears to her eyes. She blinked them back, but not before Colt noticed. "I'm sorry," he said. "Didn't mean to bring up painful things." "It's all right. I miss him. He was a good man, a kind man. The fever took him so fast, and then the business failed, and suddenly I had nothing and no one. The teaching position in Tucson was supposed to be my fresh start." She laughed bitterly. "Some start getting stranded in Silver Creek." "Maybe it was exactly the start you needed," Colt said. "Maybe you needed to get knocked down, learn what you're made of, before you could build something real. That's a harsh philosophy. It's a frontier philosophy. Out here, what doesn't kill you actually does make you stronger. The people who survive are the ones who can take a beating and get back up." He smiled slightly. "And you got back up, Miss Hartwell. You took my hand and climbed on that horse, even though you were scared. That takes courage." Evelyn was quiet, letting his words sink in. Maybe he was right. Maybe being abandoned by that stage wasn't the end of her story, but the beginning of a different, truer one. "Tell me about Fort Bowie," she said, changing the subject. "What should I expect?" "Army post, built back in '62 to protect the pass and keep an eye on the Chiricahua. It's not fancy, adobe buildings, a stockade, a few hundred soldiers at any given time, but it's got walls and guards and something resembling civilization. We'll be safe there, able to rest up before the push to Tucson. Will they let me stay there? A woman? Alone? You won't be alone. You'll be with me, and I'm known at the fort. Scout named Tom that I mentioned earlier, he and I are friends. He'll vouch for us. They've got accommodations for civilians sometimes. The post sutler's wife runs a sort of boarding house for travelers. You'll have a real bed, real food, maybe even a hot bath if you ask nice. He grinned. Civilization, such as it is. That sounds like heaven. It will after 2 days in the saddle. He stood, stretched, kicked dirt over the fire until it was completely extinguished. We should get some sleep. I want to be moving by dawn, make the fort by tomorrow evening if we push hard. He pulled blankets from his saddlebag, handed her one. You take that side of the rocks, I'll take this side. If you hear anything at all, you wake me immediately. Don't try to figure out what it is. Don't try to handle it yourself. Just wake me, understand? Yes. Good night, Miss Hartwell. And for what it's worth, I'm glad I stopped in Silver Creek. Meeting you has been the most interesting thing that's happened to me in months. Interesting, she repeated. I suppose that's one word for it. His laugh was soft in the darkness. Sleep well. But sleep didn't come easily. Evelyn lay wrapped in her blanket, staring up at the stars, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the desert night. Somewhere an owl hooted. The creek burbled over rocks. Copper stamped and blew, a comforting hoarse sound that reminded her of childhood stables. And beyond all of that, barely audible, was the sound of Colt's breathing, steady and slow. The rhythm of a man who could fall asleep anywhere because he'd learned to take rest where he found it. She thought about the day, about everything that had happened, the stage leaving, Colt appearing like something out of a storybook, the ride through hostile country, the Apache warriors, and now, lying under more stars than she'd ever imagined existed, trusting her safety to a man she'd known for less than 12 hours. It should have felt insane, reckless, wrong. Instead, it felt like the first honest thing she'd done in years. Evelyn closed her eyes and, eventually, slept. And if she dreamed of gray eyes and steady hands and a voice like gravel saying, "You've got steel in you." When morning came, those words would carry her forward into whatever the trail held next. Dawn came cold and blue, the sun not yet cresting the mountains but painting the sky in shades of rose and gold. Evelyn woke to the sound of movement, her body protesting every shift as muscles she'd forgotten existed made their soreness known. She sat up slowly, wincing, and saw Colt already up, saddling Copper with efficient movements that spoke of a lifetime's practice. "Morning," he said without turning around. "There's coffee left in the pot, still warm. Drink it while I finish here." She stood carefully, her legs stiff as boards, and made her way to the fire ring where a tin cup sat waiting. The coffee was thick and strong, more bitter than she preferred, but the warmth of it spread through her chest and helped push back the morning chill. She watched Colt work, noting how he spoke softly to Copper, how his hands checked every strap and buckle twice, how nothing was left to chance. "How far to the fort?" she asked. 25, maybe 30 miles if we don't hit trouble. We'll make it by dark if we keep a steady pace." He glanced at her, taking in her stiff posture. "How bad is it?" "I'm not sure I can get back on that horse." "You can. Your body just doesn't know it yet. Walk around while I pack up, get the blood moving. It'll hurt worse before it gets better, but you'll loosen up after the first hour." He was right about the pain, but also right about the loosening. By the time they'd been riding for an hour, Evelyn's muscles had reluctantly accepted their fate and settled into a dull ache rather than sharp protest. The morning air was cool still, a brief respite before the day's heat built to its punishing crescendo. They rode through country that gradually transformed from rocky hills to rolling grassland dotted with mesquite and the occasional stand of cottonwood marking underground water. "This is the San Pedro Valley," Colt explained as they paused to let Copper drink from a shallow creek. "Runs north-south for about 100 miles. Good cattle country, or will be once the Apache situation gets settled. Right now it's too dangerous for ranching, but give it 5 years and you'll see spreads all through here." "You sound like you approve of that." "I don't approve or disapprove. I just see what's coming. The railroad's pushing west, the army's getting stronger. More settlers every year. The Apache can't hold out forever, no matter how fierce they fight. It's sad in a way. They were here first, and we're pushing them out. But history doesn't care about who was here first. It only cares about who's here last. There was a melancholy in his voice that made Evelyn study his profile. You respect them. The Apache. I do. They're some of the finest warriors I've ever seen, and I say that as a man who fought in a war. They can live off land that would kill most white men in a week. They can track a mouse across bare rock and disappear into country that doesn't have anywhere to hide. And they fight for their home, which is more than can be said for most of the soldiers sent against them. He shook his head. But respect doesn't change the outcome. The army has numbers and supplies and the whole weight of the government behind it. The Apache have courage and skill and nothing else. You can guess who wins that fight. They rode on through country that seemed empty, but probably wasn't. Evelyn found herself scanning the hills, looking for signs of watchers, though she knew she wouldn't spot an Apache scout unless he wanted to be spotted. The thought should have terrified her, but somehow, with Colt's solid presence in front of her and his rifle ready in its scabbard, she felt safer than she had any right to feel. The sun climbed higher, the heat built. They stopped twice more to water copper and rest in whatever shade they could find, Colt always choosing spots with good sight lines and defensible approaches. He moved through the landscape like he was part of it, reading signs Evelyn couldn't see, tracks in the dust, broken vegetation, the behavior of distant birds that told him whether predators were near. You're going to make a good teacher, he said during one of these stops, surprising her. What makes you say that? You pay attention, you watch, you listen. You don't assume you already know everything. That's rare. He handed her the canteen. Most folks come west with their heads full of what they think they know, and they don't bother learning what's actually true. Those are the ones who don't last. And the ones who do last? They're humble enough to learn and tough enough to keep going when learning hurts. He smiled slightly. You've got both qualities. Those kids in Tucson are lucky to be getting you. The compliment warmed her more than the sun. Thank you. I hope you're right. I've never actually taught before. This will be my first position. You'll do fine. Teaching's mostly about giving a damn whether the students learn or not. You strike me as someone who gives a damn. I do. My father believed education was the key to everything: prosperity, freedom, happiness. He made sure I got the best schooling available, even though we couldn't always afford it. I want to give that same gift to other children. Noble work, Colt said. Nobler than what I do, anyway. I don't know about that. You save lives in your own way. Maybe, though I also end them, which somewhat complicates the moral calculus. He stood, offered her his hand to pull her up. Come on, we've still got ground to cover. They were perhaps 10 miles from Fort Bowie when Copper's ears pricked forward again and Colt's whole body went tense. His hand moved to his rifle, and he reined the horse to a stop with a pressure of his knees. What is it? Evelyn whispered. Riders, coming fast from the south. He listened, head cocked. 4, maybe 5 horses, moving too quick for a casual ride. Apache. No, shod horses. I can hear the iron. White men, probably. He scanned the terrain, spotted a rocky outcrop about 50 yards off the trail. We're going to move over there. Get behind those rocks. Something about this doesn't feel right. He guided Copper off the trail and into cover, dismounting quickly and pulling Evelyn down beside him. His hand on her arm was firm, but not rough, positioning her behind a boulder that would shield her from the trail. Stay down, he said quietly. Don't move. Don't make a sound. Let me see who these riders are and what they want. The hoofbeats grew louder, and presently 5 men came into view, riding hard. Even from a distance, Evelyn could see they weren't soldiers. No uniforms, no military bearing. They were rough-looking men in trail-worn clothes, well armed, their horses lathered with sweat from being pushed too hard. The lead rider was a big man with a full beard and a hat decorated with silver conchos that caught the sunlight. They slowed as they approached the spot where Colt and Evelyn had left the trail, and the leader held up a hand to halt the group. He leaned down from his saddle, studying the ground. Fresh tracks, he called out. Single horse, carrying double. Can't be more than 5 minutes ahead. Could be anyone, Reeves, one of the other men said. Plenty of folks use this trail? How many folks you know ride a quality horse like that and carry double through Apache country? The big man, Reeves, straightened in his saddle, his eyes scanning the landscape. No, boys, that's our man. I can feel it. Evelyn felt Colt go absolutely still beside her. His hand had moved to his gun, and she could see the calculation in his eyes. Distance, angles, odds. When he spoke, his voice was barely a breath of sound. Bounty hunters. Looking for me. What? Evelyn's whisper was horrified. Why? Long story. Stay quiet. On the trail, Reeves was still talking. Colt Merriman's supposed to be heading to Fort Bowie, and this is the only decent route. We find him, we collect that $500 bounty from Garrison, and we all drink well for a month. He grinned, showing tobacco-stained teeth. Spread out. Search pattern. He's on foot or hiding close by. The 5 men began to fan out, moving slowly now, their eyes on the ground and the surrounding rocks. They were maybe 75 yards away, close enough that Evelyn could hear the creak of their saddle leather, the jingle of spurs and bridles. Colt's hand found hers, squeezed once, a gesture of reassurance. Then he was moving, keeping low, positioning himself between her and the approaching hunters with his rifle ready. His face had gone cold, all the warmth and humor she'd seen in him burned away by something harder and more dangerous. One of the hunters was coming straight toward their hiding spot, picking his way through the rocks on foot, while his horse followed behind. He was young, maybe 25, with a scraggly blonde beard and eyes that darted nervously. His hand rested on the butt of his revolver, but his movements were tentative, the actions of a man who was more afraid than his companions would be. 20 yards? 15? 10? Colt rose from behind the boulder like a ghost, his rifle trained on the young hunter's chest. That's far enough, he said quietly. The young man froze, his face going white. His hand moved toward his gun. Don't, Colt said, and something in his voice made the hunter's hand stop. You're fast, but you're not faster than a bullet already aimed at your heart. Now, real slow, take that pistol out with 2 fingers and drop it on the ground. The hunter complied, his hand shaking. Good. Now call your friends over here. Tell them you found me. But tell them I've got a rifle on you, and if anyone tries anything stupid, you're the first to die. Can you do that? The hunter nodded jerkily, then called out in a voice that cracked with fear, Reeves! Over here! I found him! The other 4 men converged quickly, weapons drawn. They stopped when they saw the tableau, Colt standing with his rifle trained on their companion, using the young hunter as a shield. Reeves's face darkened with anger. Merriman! Thought that might be you when I saw the quality of that horse. Jackson Reeves, Colt said flatly. Should have known Garrison would hire trash like you. Bounty hunter's not trash, Merriman. It's honest work bringing in wanted men. Reeves kept his hand on his gun but didn't draw. You're wanted in Prescott for the murder of William Garrison's nephew. $500, dead or alive. You can come peaceful or we can do this the hard way. I didn't murder anyone. Thomas Garrison drew on me first, in front of 20 witnesses. It was a fair fight. That's not how his uncle tells it. And William Garrison's got money and influence. He bought himself a judge who issued a warrant, and that warrant says murder. Reeves smiled coldly. So you can argue the law with me all you want, but at the end of the day, I've got paper that says you're mine. Colt's jaw tightened. I'm not going anywhere with you, Reeves. And if you try to take me, some of you won't ride away from this spot, starting with this boy here. The young hunter made a small, frightened sound. You'd kill him? Reeves sounded skeptical. Kid's barely shaving. You're not that kind of man, Merriman. I'm exactly that kind of man when I need to be. And right now, I'm protecting someone I've given my word to keep safe. So you've got a choice, Jackson. You and your boys ride away, forget you saw me, and everybody lives. Or you push this and I start dropping bodies. Your call. The tension stretched like a wire pulled too tight. Evelyn, still hidden behind the rocks, hardly dared to breathe. She could see the calculation in Reeves' eyes, weighing the bounty against the cost. His men were looking at him, waiting for orders, their hands on their weapons but nobody making a move yet. Then another voice cut through the silence. I wouldn't test him if I were you, Jackson. Everyone turned. A 6th rider was approaching from the south, but this one wore a blue cavalry uniform with sergeant's stripes on his sleeves. He was older, maybe 50, with gray in his beard and the weathered face of a career soldier. He rode easily, his rifle across his saddle, making no threatening moves but radiating authority. "Tom," Colt said, and Evelyn heard the relief in his voice. "Good timing. Usually is where you're concerned." The sergeant, Tom, reined in his horse and surveyed the scene. "Gentlemen, I'm Sergeant Tom Jeffords, out of Fort Bowie. I couldn't help but overhear something about a warrant?" "Private matter," Reeves said shortly. "Army business." "Well, see, that's where you're wrong. Colt Merriman here is under contract with the United States Army as a civilian scout, has been for the better part of 3 years, which means any legal proceedings against him have to go through military channels." Tom's voice was calm but firm. "You got a warrant. You present it to the commanding officer at Fort Bowie. Let him sort out the jurisdictional questions. What you don't do is try to arrest a contracted Army scout in the middle of hostile territory during active operations." "We're not in hostile territory," one of Reeves's men objected. "Son, you're standing 10 miles from an Apache reservation and 15 miles from where a war party killed 3 prospectors last week. You're in the most hostile territory in Arizona, and I'm telling you, official-like, that you need to let this matter proceed through proper channels." Tom's hand shifted slightly on his rifle. "Of course, you can argue with me if you want, but I should mention that there's a patrol of 20 cavalry soldiers about half a mile behind me, and they tend to take a dim view of civilians threatening their scouts." It was a bluff. Evelyn could tell from the way Tom said it. Too casual, too confident. But Reeves couldn't be sure, and that uncertainty showed on his face. "This ain't over, Merriman," he said finally. "Garrison's warrant is legitimate, and sooner or later you're going to have to answer for what you did." "Maybe," Colt said, "but not today. Now mount up and ride out before Tom's patrol gets close enough to ask questions." Reeves stared at him for a long moment, then gestured to his men. "Let's go, boys. We'll catch up with our friend another time." They mounted and rode north, back the way they'd come, pushing their tired horses harder than was wise. The young hunter Colt had been holding at gunpoint, scrambled for his own horse and followed, never looking back. When they were out of sight, Colt lowered his rifle and let out a long breath. "Thanks, Tom. You saved me from having to do something I'd regret." "Probably would have regretted it worse if you'd let them take you." Tom dismounted, walked over to shake Colt's hand. "Jackson Reeves is mean as a snake and twice as patient. He'd have accidentally killed you on the trail back to Prescott, collected his bounty, and nobody would have asked questions." "I figured." Colt turned toward the rocks. "Miss Hartwell, you can come out now. It's safe." Evelyn emerged on shaking legs, trying to process what had just happened. The casual way these men discussed killing and being killed, the cold calculation of violence, the thin line between life and death, it was all so far from anything she'd experienced that she felt like she was watching a play rather than living reality. Tom swept off his hat when he saw her, his weather-beaten face softening with surprise. "Well now, Colt, you didn't mention you were traveling with a lady." "Tom Jeffords? This is Miss Evelyn Hartwell. She's heading to Tucson to take up a teaching position. Miss Hartwell, Tom here is the finest scout in the territory and one of the few white men the Chiricahua actually trust." "Ma'am." Tom's bow was courtly, incongruous, coming from a man who'd just run off 5 bounty hunters with a bluff and a rifle. "It's a pleasure. Though I have to say you've chosen some interesting company for your journey." "I didn't have much choice," Evelyn said, finding her voice. "Colt rescued me in Silver Creek when the stage left without me." Tom's eyes sharpened. "Pettigrew? You know about that?" "Everybody knows about Pettigrew. Man's lucky someone hasn't shot him yet." Tom looked at Colt. "So you came riding to the rescue like one of those knights in the storybooks?" "Something like that." Colt was already moving toward Copper, checking the horse over. "More like I couldn't ride past and leave her stranded. You know me, Tom. Can't resist a lost cause." "That you can't." Tom studied them both, and Evelyn had the sense he was seeing more than she was comfortable with him seeing. "Well, this complicates things somewhat. You planning to take her all the way to Tucson?" "That was the idea. Might want to rethink that plan. If Reeves knows you're on this trail, he'll be waiting somewhere between here and Tucson. Man's got patience enough to set up an ambush, and next time I might not happen by to run him off." Tom rubbed his beard thoughtfully. "Plus there's the matter of that warrant. Much as I'd like to dismiss it as Garrison throwing money around, the fact is, there's paper on you. Eventually, the army is going to have to address it. Colt's face had gone grim. You suggesting I turn myself in? I'm suggesting you stop running long enough to fight the charge properly. Come to Fort Bowie with me. Talk to the commander. Colonel Couts is a fair man, and he knows the value of good scouts. He'll give you a chance to clear your name before he lets any civilian law take you. And Miss Hartwell? She can stay at the fort, safe under Army protection, until we can arrange proper transport to Tucson. My wife Sarah runs the sutler's store. She'll look after her, make sure she's comfortable. Tom smiled. Might even be able to arrange a bath and a decent meal. Luxuries, I imagine, are starting to sound pretty good after 2 days on the trail. Evelyn realized both men were looking at her, waiting for her response. I don't want to cause trouble, she said carefully. If it's safer for me to wait at the fort while Colt deals with this warrant business, then that's what I'll do. But I won't leave him to face it alone if he needs someone to speak for him. Appreciate that, Colt said quietly. But you've been through enough already. No reason for you to get tangled up in my problems. You made my problems your problems when you stopped in Silver Creek, Evelyn countered. Seems only fair I return the favor. Tom laughed, a rich, warm sound. Oh, Colt, you've found yourself a stubborn one. I like her. Yeah, well, stubborn's been the theme of the last 48 hours. But there was fondness in Colt's voice. And when his eyes met Evelyn's, she saw gratitude there. And something else she couldn't quite name. They mounted up, Evelyn behind Colt on Copper, Tom on his own cavalry mount, and rode the remaining miles to Fort Bowie at an easy pace. Tom kept up a running commentary about territorial politics, Apache movements, and the latest gossip from the garrison, his voice providing a comfortable counterpoint to the rhythm of hoofbeats. Fort Bowie appeared in the distance as the sun began its descent toward the western mountains. It wasn't impressive, just a collection of adobe buildings surrounded by a low wall, with the American flag snapping in the wind above the headquarters building. But after 2 days in the wilderness, it looked like civilization itself to Evelyn, and she felt her body sag with relief. They rode through the main gate as the bugler was playing evening colors. Soldiers were forming up for the flag ceremony, and the few civilians present, traders, teamsters, a couple of Mexican women doing laundry, stopped their work to watch the flag come down. Tom led them past the parade ground to a building that had Sutler painted on a wooden sign. A woman emerged as they dismounted, small, dark-haired, with quick eyes and a ready smile. Tom Jeffords, what trouble are you bringing me now? The usual kind, Sarah. This is Colt Merriman, you remember him, and Miss Evelyn Hartwell, who needs a safe place to rest and clean up. Think you can manage? Sarah's eyes took in Evelyn's trail-worn appearance, the men's clothes, the exhaustion written on her face. Her expression softened immediately. Oh, you poor dear, come with me. We'll get you sorted out. She took Evelyn's arm gently. Tom, you and Colt see to the horses and go report to the colonel. Miss Hartwell is my responsibility now. Evelyn looked back at Colt, suddenly reluctant to leave him. You'll be all right? I'll be fine. Tom won't let them clap me in irons without a hearing. You go get that bath you've been dreaming about. He smiled, and the warmth in it made her chest tight. I'll check on you later. Sarah led her into the sutler's store, really a combination trading post, dry goods emporium, and boarding house. The main room was cluttered with merchandise, barrels of flour and sugar, bolts of cloth, tinned goods, ammunition, tools, and 100 other items necessary for life on the frontier. But behind a curtain was a smaller, more private space with a cot, a washstand, and blessedly, a copper tub. I'm going to heat water for you, Sarah said, already moving with practiced efficiency. It'll take about 20 minutes. Meanwhile, you sit here, take off those boots, and tell me how you ended up riding through Apache country with Colt Merriman. So Evelyn told her about St. Louis and her father's death, about the teaching position in Tucson, about being stranded in Silver Creek and Colt's offer of help. Sarah listened without interrupting, occasionally making sympathetic sounds, her hands never stopping their work as she heated water on the stove and laid out soap and towels. Colt's a good man, Sarah said when Evelyn finished. Rough around the edges and with a past that's got some dark places in it, but good where it counts. You were lucky he came along when he did. I know. But now he's in trouble because some rich man's trying to blame him for a fair fight, and I feel responsible somehow, even though I know that doesn't make sense. Welcome to the frontier, honey. Nothing makes sense out here, and the only law that matters is the law of whoever's got the most money or the most guns. Sarah tested the bathwater with her elbow, nodded satisfaction. But Tom will look after him, and Colonel Couts is fair. If there were witnesses to the shooting, if it really was self-defense, then there's a good chance the charges won't stick. And if they do stick? Sarah's face grew solemn. Then Colt will have to stand trial, and we'll all pray the jury sees sense. But let's not borrow trouble before it arrives. For now, you take this bath, put on this clean dress I'm lending you, we're about the same size, and then you're going to eat a proper meal and sleep in a real bed. Tomorrow's problems can wait for tomorrow. The bath was heaven. Evelyn sank into the hot water and felt 2 days of dust and fear and exhaustion soak away. She scrubbed her skin until it was pink, washed her hair twice with the harsh lye soap Sarah provided, and emerged feeling human again for the first time since the stage left Silver Creek. The borrowed dress was simple calico, faded from many washings but clean and respectable. Sarah had also provided undergarments and stockings, refusing Evelyn's protests about not being able to pay for any of it. You can settle accounts when you get your teaching salary, Sarah said firmly. For now, you're a guest, and guests don't pay. Dinner was served in Sarah and Tom's private quarters behind the store. Beef stew with actual vegetables, fresh bread, and apple pie that Sarah confessed she'd made just that morning. Tom and Colt joined them, both men looking tired but less tense than earlier. Colt had washed up too, his face clean-shaven now, his dark hair still damp. Without the trail dust and stubble, he looked younger, more approachable, and Evelyn found herself staring before she caught herself and looked away. Talk to Colonel Couts, Tom said around a mouthful of stew. He's willing to give Colt a fair hearing tomorrow. Let him present his side of the story. The colonel's sending a telegram to Prescott. See what the actual facts are versus what Garrison's been claiming. If there were witnesses who can testify it was self-defense, that goes a long way toward killing the warrant. There were witnesses, Colt said. Whole saloon full of them. Thomas Garrison was drunk, accused me of cheating at cards, drew on me when I stood up to leave. I shot him once. He died 3 days later from the wound. I didn't cheat. The house dealer confirmed I was playing straight. And I didn't want to fight. But he didn't give me a choice. Why does his uncle think you murdered him? Evelyn asked. Because rich men don't like to think their kin can be wrong. Easier to blame the hired gun than admit your nephew was a drunk who couldn't hold his temper or his liquor. Colt's voice was bitter. William Garrison's got mining interests in Prescott, owns half the town council. When his nephew died, he decided someone had to pay, and I was convenient. But the truth will come out, Sarah said firmly. It always does. Sometimes, Tom agreed, but sometimes truth takes a back seat to money and power. We'll see which way this breaks. He looked at Colt. Meanwhile, you're confined to the post. Not under arrest, but the colonel wants you where he can find you until this is settled. That acceptable? Do I have a choice? Not really, no. Colt nodded slowly. All right, I'll stay put, but I want to know the minute that telegram comes back from Prescott. They finished the meal talking of other things. Sarah's difficulties getting supplies through Apache country, Tom's latest scouting mission, the rumors of a new railroad spur that might eventually reach Fort Bowie. It was normal conversation, domestic and comfortable, and Evelyn found herself relaxing into it, grateful for the illusion of safety, even if she knew it was temporary. After dinner, Colt walked her back to her quarters in the Sutler's building. The night was cool and clear, stars blazing overhead, the sounds of the fort settling in for sleep all around them, laughter from the enlisted barracks, a bugle playing taps, the stamp and snort of horses in the stables. They stopped outside her door, and for a moment neither of them spoke. The silence stretched, full of things unsaid, heavy with the awareness that tomorrow might change everything. Thank you, Evelyn said finally, for everything, for stopping in Silver Creek, for bringing me here safely, for being who you are. I didn't do anything special, Colt said quietly. Just what any decent man would do. No, not any man. You. She reached out, hesitated, then took his hand. His skin was warm and calloused, the hand of a man who worked with tools and weapons and horses. I meant what I said earlier. If you need someone to speak for you, to tell them what kind of man you are, I will. You've known me 3 days, Miss Hartwell. That's not long enough to know what kind of man I am. It's long enough to know you're good. It's long enough to know you keep your word. And it's long enough to know... She trailed off, not quite ready to finish that thought. To know what? His voice was soft, his gray eyes searching hers in the starlight. To know that I trust you, completely. With my life, with my future, with everything that matters. She squeezed his hand. I don't trust easily, Colt Merriman, but I trust you. Something moved across his face. Surprise, gratitude, and beneath it all, something that looked like longing. For a moment she thought he might kiss her, and she realized she wanted him to, propriety and good sense be damned. But he didn't. Instead, he raised her hand to his lips, pressed a kiss to her knuckles that was somehow more intimate than any embrace. You honor me, he said, and I'll do my best to be worthy of that trust. Sleep well, Evelyn. Tomorrow we'll face whatever comes, and we'll face it together. He released her hand and stepped back, touched his hat brim in that gesture she was coming to know, and walked away into the darkness, leaving her standing in the doorway with her heart beating too fast and her thoughts in chaos. Inside, she lay on the cot in the darkness and tried to make sense of what she was feeling. 3 days ago, she'd been Evelyn Hartwell, proper schoolteacher from St. Louis, heading west to start a respectable life in a respectable profession. Now she was something else entirely, a woman who'd crossed Apache country on horseback, who'd watched her rescuer face down bounty hunters, who'd fallen halfway in love with a man who carried a gun and carried ghosts and carried himself with a dignity that didn't need fine clothes or fine words to be real. It was madness. It violated every rule of propriety and good sense she'd ever been taught. A woman didn't throw herself at a man she barely knew, didn't let her heart run wild after 3 days of acquaintance, didn't dream about futures that couldn't possibly work. But the frontier had different rules. Out here, 3 days could matter more than 3 years back east. Out here, you learned what someone was made of, not through social niceties, but through how they acted when death was close and choices mattered. And Evelyn had learned that Colt Merriman was made of something rare and fine, something worth holding on to if she got the chance. She fell asleep thinking about his hands, his voice, his eyes in the starlight, and dreamed of riding through endless red rock country with her arms around his waist and the whole dangerous, beautiful territory spread out before them like a promise. Tomorrow would bring its troubles. Tomorrow the telegram would arrive, and the colonel would make his judgment, and Colt would either walk free or face a trial that might end with a noose. Tomorrow, everything could fall apart. But tonight, safe within Fort Bowie's walls, listening to the desert wind sing through the cottonwoods, Evelyn let herself hope. Let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, being left behind by that stage in Silver Creek wasn't the worst thing that ever happened to her. Maybe it was the best. Morning came too soon and too slow at the same time. Evelyn woke to the sounds of the fort coming to life. Boots on hard-packed earth, voices calling orders, the clang of the smithy's hammer already ringing out despite the early hour. She dressed in Sarah's borrowed calico and braided her hair with fingers that trembled slightly, trying not to think about what this day might bring. Sarah had breakfast waiting when Evelyn emerged. Cornmeal mush with molasses, strong coffee, and biscuits that were only slightly hard. Tom was already gone, off to his duties, but Sarah kept up a steady stream of conversation that Evelyn suspected was designed to keep her from dwelling on worry. Colonel Kautz is a Harvard man, Sarah said, refilling Evelyn's coffee cup. Fought in the war, saw action at Gettysburg. He's fair-minded, which is more than you can say for most officers out here. If the facts support Colt's version of events, the colonel will see justice done. And if William Garrison's money talks louder than facts, Sarah's face grew somber. Then we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. But don't give up hope yet, dear. The Army has its faults, but it doesn't like civilian interference in its business. A contracted scout is Army business, and the colonel won't take kindly to some mine owner trying to dictate how he handles his personnel. The morning dragged on with agonizing slowness. Evelyn tried to help Sarah with chores around the store, but she was too distracted to be useful, her mind constantly returning to Colt and whatever was happening in the colonel's office. She imagined a dozen different outcomes, each worse than the last. Colt arrested. Colt sent back to Prescott in chains. Colt standing trial before a jury bought, and paid for by garrison money. It was nearly noon when Tom finally appeared, his face unreadable. Evelyn's heart dropped into her stomach. "Well?" Sarah demanded. "Don't keep us in suspense, Thomas Jeffords." Tom's stern expression broke into a grin. "Telegraph came back from Prescott an hour ago. Colonel contacted the U.S. Marshal's office, and they did some investigating. Turns out there were 17 witnesses to the shooting, including the house dealer, the bartender, and 2 off-duty deputies. Every single one confirms Colt's story. Thomas Garrison drew first. Colt fired in self-defense. Clean shooting with no malice aforethought." Evelyn felt her knees go weak with relief. "So the warrant is void." The warrant was always questionable. William Garrison leaned on a local judge who owed him favors, got paper issued without proper investigation. But the marshal's office is declaring it invalid. No grounds for murder charges when it's clearly self-defense. Garrison's not happy about it, but there's nothing he can do. Federal law trumps local corruption, at least when the Army gets involved. "Where's Colt?" Evelyn asked. "Still with the colonel. Couts is writing up an official statement for the record, making sure all the documentation is proper. He'll be released within the hour." Tom's eyes twinkled. "Might want to make yourself presentable if you're planning to greet him." Evelyn blushed, which made both Tom and Sarah laugh. But she went to the small mirror Sarah kept in the back room and fussed with her hair, pinching her cheeks to bring color to them, smoothing the borrowed dress. She felt foolish and young and giddy with relief, all the fear of the past day evaporating like morning dew. When Colt finally emerged from the headquarters building, she was waiting on the sutler's porch, trying to look casual and probably failing. He spotted her immediately, and his whole face transformed with a smile that made her heart skip. "Heard the news?" he called as he approached. "Tom told us." "Oh, Colt, I'm so glad." He climbed the steps to stand before her, and she noticed he looked lighter somehow, as if a weight had been lifted from his shoulders. Free and clear. The colonel even apologized for the inconvenience, if you can believe that. Said the Army values my service and won't let civilian grudges interfere with military operations. "So what happens now?" "Now I finish what I started. Get you to Tucson. Make sure you reach your teaching position safely." He paused, his expression growing more serious. "That is, if you still want my company. I'd understand if you'd rather travel with an Army escort or wait for the next stage. You've already been through more trouble than you bargained for." "Don't be ridiculous," Evelyn said firmly. "You gave me your word you'd see me safely to Tucson, and I'm holding you to it. Besides, I trust you more than I'd trust a dozen soldiers or stage drivers." Something warm and grateful flickered in his eyes. "Then we'll leave tomorrow morning, soon as we can provision up. It's about 40 miles to Tucson from here. We can make it in a day and a half if we push, 2 days if we take it easy. There's a ranch about halfway, owned by some folks I know. We can stop there for the night, get you a proper bed and a decent meal." "That sounds wonderful. Though I have to admit, I'm getting used to camping under the stars." "Are you now?" His smile was teasing. 3 days ago you couldn't imagine getting on a horse, and now you're a seasoned trail rider?" "I wouldn't go that far, but I'm learning. You're a good teacher. And you're a good student." He glanced around, then lowered his voice. "Listen, there's something I need to tell you. The colonel mentioned that Jackson Reeves might still be in the area, waiting for another chance at that bounty. Now that the warrant's dead, he's got no legal standing, but a man like Reeves doesn't always care about legal standing. He might try something stupid out of pure spite." Evelyn felt the relief drain away, replaced by renewed worry. "So we're still in danger?" "We're always in some danger. This is Arizona territory. But yeah, we need to be careful. I'm going to ask Tom to lend us another rifle, and we'll travel prepared. If Reeves shows his face, he'll regret it." The cold certainty in Colt's voice reminded Evelyn that the man standing before her, smiling and gentle, was also capable of lethal violence when necessary. It should have frightened her. Instead, she found it oddly comforting. They spent the rest of the day preparing for the journey. Colt purchased supplies from Sarah's store: dried beef, hardtack, coffee, ammunition. He checked over Copper's tack with meticulous care, replaced a stirrup leather that was showing wear, and cleaned his weapons until they gleamed. Tom contributed a Spencer repeating rifle and a box of cartridges, along with detailed information about water sources and potential trouble spots along the route to Tucson. "There's a ranch about 25 miles south of here," Tom said. drawing a rough map in the dirt with a stick. Belongs to Miguel and Alina Vasquez, good people. They know me, and they know Colt. You can trust them. Stop there for the night, rest up, then push on to Tucson the next day. What about Reeves? Colt asked. I'm sending word to the patrol that works this sector. They'll keep an eye out, maybe rattle him a bit, let him know the army's watching, but you should still be careful. Man with a grudge is more dangerous than a man chasing money. That evening, Sarah insisted on hosting a farewell dinner. She'd somehow acquired a chicken, rare luxury at a frontier fort, and roasted it with potatoes and carrots that must have cost a small fortune given how far they had to be freighted. Tom produced a bottle of whiskey he'd been saving, and they toasted Colt's cleared name and Evelyn's safe journey. To new beginnings, Chet, Tom said, raising his glass, and to old friends who keep finding new troubles. I'll drink to that, Colt agreed, and they all did. The conversation flowed easily, helped along by the whiskey and the relief of knowing the worst hadn't happened. Tom told stories of his years with the Chiricahua, of Cochise, and the delicate peace that had held for a time before the chief's death. Sarah shared tales of fort life, of the eccentric officers and the brave soldiers, and the constant struggle to maintain civilization in a place that seemed determined to resist it. Evelyn found herself laughing more than she had in months, the tension of the past days finally releasing its grip. She caught Colt watching her across the table, his expression soft and unguarded, and felt heat rise to her cheeks. When their eyes met, he didn't look away, and neither did she, until Tom cleared his throat meaningfully and Sarah kicked him under the table. After dinner, Colt walked Evelyn back to her quarters again. The night was cool and still, the stars so bright they cast shadows. They moved slowly, neither one eager for the walk to end, their shoulders occasionally brushing in a way that felt both accidental and entirely deliberate. I've been thinking, Colt said as they neared the sutler's building, about after we reach Tucson, about what comes next for me. What do you mean? I mean I'm tired, Evelyn. Tired of drifting, tired of living out of a saddlebag, tired of not having a place to call home. He stopped walking, turned to face her. Meeting you made me realize something. Made me want something I haven't wanted in a long time. What's that? Her voice came out barely above a whisper. A reason to stay somewhere. A reason to build instead of just survive. He reached out, touched her cheek with a gentleness that seemed at odds with his calloused hands. I know it's too soon to say this. I know we've only known each other a few days, but I need you to know that these days have mattered to me. You matter to me. And when we get to Tucson, I'd like permission to court you properly, if you'll have me. Evelyn's heart was pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. Colt, You don't have to answer now, he said quickly. Take time to think about it. You're starting a new life, a new position. You don't need some broken-down scout complicating things. But I wanted you to know where I stand, what I'm hoping for. You're not broken down, Evelyn said fiercely. And you're not complicating anything. You saved me, Colt, in more ways than just Silver Creek. You showed me what strength looks like, what honor looks like. You made me believe I could be brave enough for this country, for this life. So yes, you have my permission to court me, and you don't have to wait until Tucson to start. For a moment he just stared at her, as if he couldn't quite believe what he'd heard. Then he was kissing her, his lips warm and sure against hers, his hands cupping her face like she was something precious and fragile. Evelyn kissed him back with all the pent-up emotion of the past days, with relief and joy and the dizzy realization that she was falling in love with this man, had maybe already fallen. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Colt rested his forehead against hers. I'll do right by you, he promised. I swear it. I'll be the man you deserve. You already are, she whispered. You already are. They stood there in the starlight, holding each other, neither one willing to let go and face the morning. But eventually, the night grew cold, and propriety demanded they part. Colt kissed her once more, soft and sweet, then stepped back. Get some sleep, he said. Tomorrow's another long ride, and I need you sharp. I will. You too. Evelyn? He paused at the bottom of the steps. Thank you. For trusting me. For seeing past the gun and the scars to whatever's underneath. There's nothing to see past, Colt Merriman. The gun and the scars are part of who you are, and I love all of it." She hadn't meant to say love. The word slipped out before she could catch it, too honest and too soon. But when she saw his face, the wonder and the joy and the naked vulnerability, she couldn't regret it. "I love you too," he said simply. "God help me, I do." Then he was gone, walking toward the barracks where Tom had arranged quarters for him, and Evelyn was alone with her racing heart and the impossible, wonderful truth of what had just happened. She barely slept that night, her mind too full of possibilities and promises. When dawn came, she was already dressed and ready, her few belongings packed in a canvas bag Sarah had given her. The borrowed dress she would return, but Sarah had insisted she keep the men's riding clothes from Silver Creek, practical and proper for trail travel. Colt was waiting by the stables with Copper saddled and provisioned. He looked rested and determined, his rifle secured in its scabbard, his gun belt riding easy on his hips. When he saw her, his whole face lit up with a smile that made her insides warm. "Morning," he said. "Ready for the last leg of this journey?" "More than ready. Let's get to Tucson so I can start my new life." "Our new life," he corrected softly, and she felt her smile grow wider. Tom and Sarah came to see them off, Tom shaking Colt's hand with the grip of old friends who'd been through fire together, Sarah hugging Evelyn and whispering, "You hold on to that man. He's one of the good ones." "I will," Evelyn promised, "and thank you for everything." Then they were riding out through Fort Bowie's gates, heading south toward Tucson and whatever future awaited them there. The morning was cool and clear, the land spreading before them in shades of gold and russet. Evelyn settled behind Colt with her arms around his waist, and for the first time since the stage left Silver Creek, she felt not just safe, but home. They rode through country that was gentler than what they'd crossed before, grassland dotted with cattle that belonged to ranchers brave or foolish enough to try their luck in Apache territory. Colt pointed out landmarks, a distinctive rock formation, a spring that ran year-round, the ruins of an old Spanish mission slowly crumbling back into the desert. "The Vasquez Ranch is just ahead," he said as the sun reached its zenith. "We'll stop for a meal, rest the horse, maybe get you out of the sun for a while." The ranch materialized out of the landscape like a mirage, a low adobe house with a covered porch, a barn and corrals, fields of struggling corn and squash, and a windmill that creaked as it turned. Dogs barked as they approached, and a man emerged from the barn, rifle in hand, then relaxed when he recognized the rider. "Colt Merriman," he called in Spanish-accented English. "What brings you to my humble rancho?" "Miguel, good to see you." Colt dismounted, helped Evelyn down. "We're heading to Tucson. Hoped we might impose on your hospitality for a few hours." Miguel was a compact man in his 40s with graying hair and the weathered face of someone who'd worked under the sun his whole life. His eyes were kind as they took in Evelyn's trail-worn appearance. "Any friend of Colt's is welcome here. Alina will be happy for the company. She complains I am too serious, not enough conversation." He called toward the house, and a woman appeared, wiping her hands on her apron. Alina Vasquez was younger than her husband, perhaps 30, with glossy black hair and the kind of beauty that came from contentment rather than perfection. She took one look at Evelyn and immediately switched to rapid Spanish, gesturing toward the house. Evelyn caught maybe one word in 3, but the meaning was clear. Come inside, rest, eat. The interior of the house was cool and dim, a refuge from the heat. Alina settled Evelyn at a rough wooden table and began producing food as if by magic. Fresh tortillas, beans with chilies, strips of grilled beef, cool water from a clay jar that somehow stayed cold despite the heat outside. She chattered in a mix of Spanish and English, asking questions about where Evelyn was from, where she was going, how she'd come to be traveling with Colt. Miguel and Colt sat on the porch, talking in low voices that occasionally rose loud enough for Evelyn to catch fragments. She heard Reeves's name mentioned and the word trouble, and saw Miguel's face grow serious. But then Colt said something that made Miguel laugh, and the tension broke. After the meal, Alina insisted Evelyn rest in the bedroom, while the men talked their boring talk about danger and guns. The bed was rope-sprung with a corn husk mattress, not soft but heavenly after nights on the ground. Evelyn meant to stay awake, but exhaustion pulled her under within minutes. She woke to voices outside, not Colt and Miguel this time, but others. Strangers. Her heart kicked into alarm and she moved to the window, careful to stay out of sight. 3 riders had appeared in the yard. Even from a distance, Evelyn recognized the lead figure's bulk and the silver conchos on his hat. Jackson Reeves. She moved quickly to the door, cracking it open to hear what was being said. Colt and Miguel were standing side by side on the porch, Colt's hand near his gun, Miguel holding his rifle with casual readiness. "Merriman," Reeves said, not bothering to dismount. "Heard you got lucky with the Army. Warrants dead, charges dropped. Congratulations." "If you heard that, then you know you've got no business with me," Colt replied evenly. "So why don't you and your boys ride on? Leave honest ranchers in peace." "Thing is, I don't like leaving a job unfinished. Bothers me." Reeves leaned forward in his saddle. "You cost me money, Merryman. Cost me reputation. Man can't let that stand without some kind of reckoning. There's no reckoning to be had here. You tried to collect on false paper, got sent away empty-handed. That's how it goes sometimes. Take your pride and what's left of your reputation and ride out while you still can." "Or what? You'll shoot me. That'd just make you the murderer Garrison claimed you were." "Self-defense isn't murder," Miguel interjected, "and I'm a witness to whatever happens here. You threaten my friend on my land, I call that grounds for him to defend himself." Reeves's eyes narrowed. "This doesn't concern you, Mexican." "You're on my land. Everything here concerns me." Miguel's voice was calm, but his finger had moved to his rifle's trigger. "And I'm an American citizen, same as you, with the same rights and the same protections. You want to start legal trouble, we can do that. Otherwise, I suggest you turn around and go." For a moment, the tableau held. 5 men frozen in a standoff that could explode into violence with one wrong word or move. Evelyn held her breath, her heart hammering, silently willing Reeves to back down. Then a new voice cut through the tension. "That's enough, Reeves." Everyone turned. 2 riders were approaching from the south at an easy lope, a man in a dark suit with a silver badge on his vest, and another man younger and better dressed, carrying a leather satchel that marked him as professional rather than cowboy. "Marshal Donovan," Reeves said, and Evelyn heard the dismay in his voice. "This is a private matter." Nothing's private when it involves harassment of a civilian under federal protection. The marshal reined in his horse, fixing Reeves with a stare that could have cut glass. "I got a telegraph from Fort Bowie saying Jackson Reeves might be in this area making trouble. Decided to ride out and make sure everything stayed peaceful." "I wasn't making trouble, just talking to an old friend." "That's so." The marshal looked at Colt. "You and Reeves friends, Merriman?" "Not even a little bit." "Thought so." Donovan turned back to Reeves. "Here's what's going to happen. You and your boys are going to ride out of this territory and not come back. The warrant you were chasing is void, which means you've got no legal business here. If I hear you've been bothering Merriman or anyone associated with him, I'll charge you with harassment and make sure you spend some time in the territorial prison. We clear?" Reeves's face had gone red with suppressed fury. "Crystal." "Good. Now get moving before I change my mind and arrest you for trespassing." The bounty hunter jerked his horse's head around and spurred hard, his men following. They rode north at a gallop, raising a cloud of dust that hung in the still air like a curse. Marshal Donovan dismounted, extended his hand to Colt. "Tom Jeffords sent word you might need backup. Figured it couldn't hurt to ride out and show the flag." "Appreciate it, Marshal. This is Miguel Vasquez." "We've met. Miguel runs a good operation here, one of the few ranchers making a go of it in this country." The marshal turned his attention to the younger man who'd been hanging back. "This here is Joshua Bennett, lawyer from Tucson. He's got some news that might interest you." Bennett stepped forward, opened his satchel, and withdrew an official-looking document. "Mr. Merriman, I've been asked by the territorial governor to deliver this to you. It's an official statement clearing you of all charges related to the death of Thomas Garrison, signed by the governor himself and filed with the territorial court in Prescott. William Garrison's attempts to use his influence to bring false charges have been noted and officially censured. You're free and clear, with documentation to prove it." Colt took the paper with hands that shook slightly. "The governor did this?" "The governor doesn't like wealthy men trying to manipulate the justice system for personal vendettas. Bad for business, bad for the territory's reputation. Mr. Garrison has been warned that any further attempts to pursue you will result in charges against him." Bennett smiled. You've got powerful friends, Mr. Merriman. The army went to bat for you, and they have the governor's ear. Evelyn, unable to contain herself any longer, burst out onto the porch. Colt! Did you hear that? It's really over! He turned to her, and the expression on his face, wonder and relief and joy, made her eyes sting with tears. It's over, he repeated. Really over. She threw her arms around him, propriety forgotten, and he caught her, lifting her off her feet and spinning her once before setting her down gently. The men around them were grinning, even the normally stern marshal showing amusement at the display. Miss, I'm guessing you're the school teacher Tom mentioned? Donovan asked. Yes, sir. Evelyn Hartwell. I'm heading to Tucson to take up a teaching position. Well, Miss Hartwell, you're in good hands with Colt here. And now that all this legal nonsense is settled, you can both get on with your lives without looking over your shoulders. They stayed at the Vasquez Ranch through the afternoon and evening. Miguel insisted on celebrating with a proper meal. Goat stewed with peppers and tomatoes, fresh bread and wine he'd been saving for a special occasion. Alina fussed over Evelyn, clearly delighted to have another woman to talk to, pressing recipes and advice about desert living into her hands. Marshal Donovan and Joshua Bennett stayed for the meal, then rode on toward Tucson with promises to spread word that Colt Merriman was cleared of all charges and under territorial protection. Anyone gives you trouble, Donovan said before leaving, you come find me. The law's on your side now, and I'll make sure it stays that way. That night, Evelyn and Colt sat on the porch watching the stars emerge, Miguel and Alina having tactfully retired to give them privacy. The air was cool and sweet with the smell of desert flowers that bloomed only at night. I can hardly believe it, Colt said softly. 3 days ago I was a man with a price on his head. Now I'm free, with legal documentation and the territorial governor's protection. Feels like a dream. It's real, Evelyn assured him, taking his hand. You're free. We're both free. Free to build the future we want. He turned to her, his eyes reflecting starlight. What kind of future do you want, Evelyn? I want to teach. I want to help children learn and grow. I want to make a difference in Tucson, build something lasting. She paused. And I want you beside me while I do it, if you'll stay. Wild horses couldn't drag me away. He raised her hand to his lips, kissed her knuckles. I'm done drifting, done chasing the next job and the next. You're my home now. Wherever you are, that's where I belong. Even in a dusty little town full of children and respectable people who might not understand a man like you? Especially there. The frontier needs builders more than it needs drifters. You said that yourself. Well, I'm ready to build. A house, a life, a future. With you, if you'll have me. I will, she whispered. I do. Colt, is this too fast? Are we being foolish, making promises after such a short time? Maybe, he admitted, or maybe the frontier teaches you to recognize what matters and hold on to it when you find it. I know what I feel, Evelyn. I know what I want, and I'm too old to waste time pretending otherwise. She leaned against him, his arm coming around her shoulders, and they sat in comfortable silence as the night deepened around them. Tomorrow they would ride the final miles to Tucson. Tomorrow she would meet the education board and begin her new position. Tomorrow their future would truly begin. But tonight, under Arizona stars with the desert wind singing soft melodies through the mesquite, they simply existed together. Two people who'd been lost finding themselves found. Two hearts that had been broken learning to beat in tandem. Two souls that the frontier had tested and tempered and ultimately brought together. Thank you, Evelyn said quietly. For what? For stopping in Silver Creek, for giving me your hand when I needed it most, for seeing me not as a burden, but as someone worth saving. You saved yourself, Colt replied. I just gave you a ride. No, you gave me courage. You gave me hope. You gave me a reason to believe that being left behind by that stage wasn't the end of my story, but the beginning of something better. He kissed the top of her head, and she felt him smile against her hair. Then I guess we saved each other. They stayed there until the moon rose, silver and full, casting long shadows across the desert. Inside the house, Alina began singing softly in Spanish, a lullaby or maybe a love song. Miguel's deeper voice joined in harmony. Somewhere in the darkness, a coyote called, and another answered. The frontier was still dangerous. Life was still hard. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges and sorrows. But tonight, wrapped in each other's arms under a sky full of stars, Evelyn and Colt allowed themselves to simply be happy. The stage had left her behind in Silver Creek, but Colt Merriman had tipped his hat and said, "Ride with me," and she had. And that ride had brought her here, to this moment, to this man, to this future full of possibility and promise. Sometimes being lost was how you found your way home. They left the Vasquez ranch at first light, Miguel and Alina standing in the yard waving goodbye as Copper carried them south toward Tucson and the life that waited there. The morning was crisp and cool, the kind of perfect desert dawn that made you forget the brutal heat would return by midday. Evelyn sat behind Colt with her arms around his waist, no longer holding on from fear but from choice, from the simple desire to be close to him. The land changed as they rode, becoming more settled, more touched by human hands. They passed other ranches, saw cattle grazing in greater numbers, crossed roads that showed the tracks of freight wagons and stages. Civilization was creeping into the territory, slowly but inevitably, taming the wilderness mile by mile. "Tucson's different from what you've seen so far," Colt said as they stopped to water Copper at a creek that ran clear and cold from the mountains. "It's an old Spanish town, been there for more than 100 years. Adobe buildings, Mexican families who've been there for generations, mixed in with newer arrivals, miners, ranchers, merchants, soldiers. It's rough in places, but it's got culture too. Churches, schools, even a newspaper." "And Tucson? Where I'll be teaching." "About 10 miles south of Tucson. Smaller, newer, mostly American families trying to farm and ranch. They've been wanting a proper school for years, finally got the Territorial Education Board to approve funding for a teacher. That's you." He smiled over his shoulder. "They're lucky to be getting you." "I hope I can live up to their expectations." "You will. You're strong, Evelyn. Stronger than you know. If you can survive Apache country and bounty hunters and 2 days in the saddle with a broken-down scout, you can handle a classroom full of children." "You're not broken down," she said for what felt like the 100th time. "And I couldn't have survived any of it without you." "We survived it together. That's different." They rode on through country that grew increasingly green as irrigation brought water to fields of cotton and corn and wheat. The Santa Cruz River Valley stretched before them, and in the distance Evelyn could see the brown smudge of buildings that marked Tucson proper. Her heart began to beat faster. This was it, the destination she'd been traveling toward since leaving St. Louis, the new life she'd been promised. Except now that life would be different from what she'd imagined. Now it would include Colt, if he kept his word about staying. Now it would be richer and fuller and more complicated than the simple plan of teaching school and living quietly. "Nervous?" Colt asked, somehow sensing her thoughts. "A little. What if the education board doesn't approve of me traveling with you? What if they think I'm not respectable enough? Then they're fools, and you find another position somewhere that appreciates you. But I don't think it'll come to that. You've got credentials, you've got skills, and you've got a story that'll make sense once you tell it. Stage left without you. I offered help. We traveled with proper consideration for your reputation. Nothing scandalous about that." "We kissed," Evelyn pointed out, "multiple times." "They don't need to know that part." His voice was warm with amusement. "Not yet, anyway. Let them meet you first, see what kind of teacher you are. The rest can come later." They reached the outskirts of Tucson by early afternoon. The town was bigger than Evelyn had expected, sprawling and dusty but undeniably alive. Adobe buildings lined narrow streets, their walls thick enough to keep out the heat. She saw signs in both English and Spanish, heard a mix of languages being spoken. Children played in the shade while their mothers hung laundry or tended gardens. Men led burros loaded with firewood or goods. A church bell tolled somewhere, marking the hour. Colt guided them to a small hotel near the center of town, the Congress Hotel, according to the weathered sign. "You'll stay here tonight," he said, helping her dismount. "Clean rooms, decent food, respectable enough that the education board won't question your judgment. I'll get you settled, then ride out to Tucson and let them know you've arrived." "You're not staying with me?" "Can't. Not proper, and you need proper right now. But I'll be back tomorrow morning, and we'll go meet the board together if you want." She did want, more than was probably wise. But she understood his reasoning, appreciated his consideration for her reputation, even when part of her wanted to throw reputation aside and simply be with him. The hotel proprietor was a stout German woman named Mrs. Weber, who took one look at Evelyn's trail-worn appearance and immediately began clucking over her like a mother hen. "You poor dear, traveling in such conditions. Come, I have a room with a real bed, and the bathhouse next door can have hot water ready in 20 minutes. You'll feel human again soon." Colt paid for 3 nights in advance, waving away Evelyn's protests. "Consider it part of getting you safely to your destination. You can pay me back when you get your first salary if it makes you feel better." "It does." "Thank you, Colt, for everything." He touched his hat brim, started to turn away, then stopped. "Evelyn, I meant what I said last night, about staying, about building a future. Don't doubt that while I'm gone." "I won't. Come back soon. Tomorrow morning, I promise." She watched him ride away, leading Copper down the dusty street until he disappeared around a corner. Then she let Mrs. Weber lead her upstairs to a small but clean room with a real bed and real pillows and a window that looked out over the town's rooftops. The bath was indeed ready within 20 minutes, and Evelyn sank into the hot water with a groan of pure pleasure. She scrubbed away the last traces of trail dust, washed her hair until it squeaked, and emerged feeling more like herself than she had since leaving St. Louis. Mrs. Weber had somehow produced a dress, simple blue cotton, that had probably belonged to one of her daughters, and Evelyn put it on gratefully, leaving the borrowed men's clothes folded on a chair. That evening she ate dinner in the hotel's dining room, a modest meal of roasted chicken and vegetables that tasted like a feast after days of trail food. Other guests eyed her curiously, but no one approached, and she was grateful for the privacy. Her mind was too full for social pleasantries. She was really here, in Tucson, about to start teaching, about to begin the life she'd traveled 2,000 miles to find. And somehow, impossibly, she'd found something more along the way. She'd found love in the middle of the desert, found a man who looked at her like she was worth protecting, worth cherishing, worth staying for. It should have felt too good to be true. Instead, it felt like the first true thing that had happened to her in a long time. Sleep came easily that night, helped by exhaustion and the comfort of a real mattress. She dreamed of classrooms full of eager children, of adobe houses with gardens, of gray eyes and steady hands, and a future that stretched out like the Arizona sky, wide and endless and full of possibility. Morning brought Colt back as promised. He'd cleaned up too, she noticed. Fresh shirt, face shaven smooth, hair combed back. He looked almost respectable, though the gun on his hip and the rifle on his saddle reminded anyone who looked that he was still very much a frontier man. "Ready to meet your new employers?" he asked, offering his arm like a gentleman. "As ready as I'll ever be." "Did you ride out to Tucson yesterday?" "I did. Talked to Robert Safford. He's the education officer for the territory. Told him you'd arrived safely, explained about the stage mishap. He wants to meet you this morning, along with some of the parents from Tucson. They're gathering at the territorial office at 10 o'clock. "What did you tell them about us?" "About you?" "The truth. That you missed your stage through no fault of your own, that I offered escort as a contracted Army scout, that we traveled with proper decorum and military awareness. Which is all true, just maybe not complete." He smiled slightly. "The rest is ours to share when we're ready." The Territorial Education Office was housed in a low adobe building near the plaza. Inside, the air was cool and dim, and a clerk directed them to a back room where several people were already gathered. Evelyn's first impression was of weathered faces and work-worn hands. These were frontier people, ranchers and farmers who'd carved lives from hard country and wanted better for their children. Robert Safford rose to greet them. He was younger than Evelyn expected, maybe 40, with intelligent eyes and the pale skin of someone who spent more time with books than sun. "Miss Hartwell, welcome. We've been anticipating your arrival for weeks. Please, sit." She took the offered chair, Colt standing behind her in a gesture that was both protective and respectful. Safford introduced the others, John and Mary Crawford, who ran a cattle operation near Tucson, Samuel Liu, who owned the general store, Maria Gonzalez, whose family had been farming in the valley for 3 generations, and Thomas Red Cloud, a Tohono O'odham man who served as liaison between his people and the territory's government. We've heard you had quite an adventure getting here, Safford said, his tone neutral. Perhaps you could tell us what happened. So Evelyn told them, choosing her words carefully. She described Silver Creek and Pettigrew's assault, the stage leaving without her, Colt's offer of help. She talked about the journey through Apache country, the encounter with bounty hunters, the assistance from the army at Fort Bowie. She was honest about the dangers, about traveling alone with a man she'd just met, but she framed it in terms of necessity and propriety, emphasizing that Colt had treated her with nothing but respect. When she finished, the room was quiet. Then Mary Crawford spoke, her voice firm. Miss Hartwell, I've lived in this territory for 15 years. I know what it takes to survive here. You did what you had to do, and from what I can see, you did it with grace and good sense. Any woman who can cross Apache country and come out the other side with her dignity intact is someone I want teaching my children. I agree, Maria Gonzalez added. The frontier requires different rules than back east. You showed courage and resourcefulness. Those are qualities we need in a teacher. Thomas Red Cloud had been watching Evelyn with dark, assessing eyes. Now he spoke, his English careful and precise. Colt Merriman is known among my people as a man of honor. If he vouches for you, that carries weight. If he treated you with respect through dangerous country, that tells us about your character as well as his. Safford leaned back in his chair. Miss Hartwell, your credentials are impeccable. You've got more education than most teachers we see out here, and your references from St. Louis speak to your competence and character. The question isn't whether you're qualified. You clearly are. The question is whether you're prepared for what teaching in Tucson will really mean. I understand it won't be easy, Evelyn said. I've read reports about frontier schools, overcrowded classrooms, limited supplies, children of different ages and abilities all learning together. Students who can only attend part-time because their families need them for farm work. I'm prepared for that. It's more than that, Samuel Liu said quietly. You'll be teaching Anglo children alongside Mexican children, O'odham children, possibly some Chinese children whose parents work the mines. Different languages, different cultures, different expectations. Some parents will resent their children learning English. Others will resent them learning anything else. You'll be caught in the middle of tensions that have nothing to do with education. Then I'll work to bridge those tensions, Evelyn said firmly. Education is the great equalizer, Mr. Liu. In my classroom, every child will be treated with equal respect and equal opportunity. I don't care what language they speak at home or what their parents believe. My job is to teach them to read, to write, to think. That's what I intend to do. Safford smiled, the first genuine warmth she'd seen from him. Miss Hartwell, I think you'll do just fine. The position is yours if you want it. Salary is $40 a month, paid quarterly. You'll have use of the teacherage, a small house next to the school building. Classes start in 2 weeks, giving you time to settle in and prepare. We'll provide basic supplies, though you'll likely need to supplement from your own pocket or by asking parents to contribute what they can. I accept, Evelyn said without hesitation. Thank you. I promise you won't regret this. I don't think we will. Safford stood, extended his hand. Welcome to Arizona Territory, Miss Hartwell. We're glad to have you. The others echoed the sentiment, shaking her hand and offering words of encouragement. Mary Crawford even hugged her, whispering, You're going to be wonderful, dear. I can feel it. As the meeting broke up, Thomas Red Cloud approached Colt, speaking in low tones in a language Evelyn didn't recognize. Colt responded in the same language, and the two men clasped forearms in what looked like a gesture of respect and friendship. Then Thomas turned to Evelyn. Your man is known to us, he said simply. He has walked the land with respect, has spoken truth even when truth was difficult. That is rare among your people. You are fortunate to have found each other. I know, Evelyn said softly. Thank you. Outside in the bright sunshine, Colt let out a long breath. Well, that went better than I expected. Did you think they'd turn me down? I thought there might be more questions about propriety, about us traveling together. But I should have known frontier people are more practical than that. They care about results, not appearances. What did Thomas say to you? At the end? He said his people remember me from when I helped negotiate a water rights dispute between O'odham farmers and Anglo ranchers. Said I was fair, didn't take sides based on skin color. He also said, Colt paused, looking embarrassed. He said the spirits must favor our union because we balance each other. His wisdom, my strength, my knowledge of the land, your knowledge of books. He thinks we'll build something good together. I think so too, Evelyn said, taking his hand. So what happens now? Now we ride to Tucson, get you settled in your teacherage. I'll help you fix anything that needs fixing, make sure the place is secure. And then he trailed off, looking uncertain for the first time since she'd met him. And then what? And then I need to figure out what I'm doing with my life. I can't keep scouting forever, Evelyn. The army work is drying up as the territory gets more settled. I need a trade, something stable. I've been thinking maybe I could hire on as a ranch hand, learn the cattle business. Or maybe work as a lawman. Marshal Donovan mentioned he might be looking for deputies. But whatever I do, it has to be something that lets me stay near you, because I meant what I said. You're my home now. What if you didn't have to work for someone else? Evelyn asked slowly, an idea forming. What if you built something of your own? Like what? You know this country better than almost anyone. You know the trails, the water sources, the safe routes. You speak Spanish and Apache. What if you started a guide and courier service? Help new settlers find their way, deliver messages and goods to remote ranches. Hire yourself out for protection when people need to travel dangerous routes. It would use all your skills, and you'd be your own boss. Colt stared at her, and she could see the idea taking root. That could work, he said slowly. There's definitely demand. And it would let me be flexible, take jobs when I wanted, stay close to home when I needed, but it would take money to get started. I'd need a spare horse at least, maybe two. Better equipment, licenses, advertisements. I have some money saved, Evelyn offered. Not much, but enough to help. We could be partners. Partners, he repeated, testing the word. Teacher and guide, books and bullets, civilization and wilderness. Why not? Thomas Red Cloud said we balance each other. Maybe that's how we build our future, by combining our strengths, supporting each other's dreams. He pulled her close, there in the dusty street, with the whole town watching, and kissed her soundly. You're remarkable. You know that? Absolutely remarkable. She laughed against his lips. I'm practical, and I'm in love. Those two things combined can accomplish quite a lot. They rode to Tucson that afternoon, and Evelyn saw the town that would be her home for the first time. It was smaller than Tucson, newer, rawer. Maybe 30 buildings clustered around a crossroads, with farms and ranches spreading out into the valley beyond. The school was a simple adobe structure with a covered porch and 2 rooms, one for classes and one that served as the teachers' quarters. The teacherage was spare but adequate. A rope bed, a small table and chair, shelves for books, a stove for cooking, and heat. The walls needed whitewashing and the roof needed some patching, but it was sound. More importantly, it was hers. Her first real home since her father died, her first space that belonged to her and no one else. Colt spent the afternoon making repairs, patching the roof with adobe mud, fixing a broken window shutter, reinforcing the door. Evelyn unpacked the few possessions she'd managed to keep: her father's watch, her copy of Whitman, the teaching certificate that represented years of study and hope. She arranged the classroom, swept out the dust, made plans for lessons she would teach. As the sun began to set, they sat on the schoolhouse steps, watching the sky turn colors that seemed impossible. Gold and orange and deep crimson, the clouds lit from below like they were on fire. I need to ask you something, Colt said quietly. And I need you to think before you answer, not just say what you think I want to hear. All right. The life I can offer you isn't going to be easy. I'm not a rich man, probably never will be. I've got a past that includes violence and hard choices. I'll be gone sometimes on guiding jobs, leaving you here alone. And even if people accept me, there'll always be talk about us traveling together, about me being a gunfighter, about whether a school teacher should be involved with someone like me. Are you sure you want that life? Evelyn turned to face him, taking both his hands in hers. Colt Merriman, I left St. Louis because the life there was killing me slowly. Propriety and respectability and endless rules about what a woman could and couldn't do. I came west looking for freedom, for purpose, for a chance to be myself without apology. I found all of that, and I found you. So yes, I'm sure. I want this life, I want this place, And most of all, I want you. The whole complicated, difficult, beautiful reality of you. I'm going to make mistakes, he warned. I'm going to disappoint you sometimes. I'm not practiced at being what a woman needs. Then we'll learn together. I'm not practiced at being a frontier teacher or a partner to a guide and scout. We'll muddle through and we'll do it side by side. That's what love is, isn't it? Choosing someone despite their flaws, because of them, making space for each other to grow and stumble and try again. He was quiet for a long moment, his eyes searching hers. Then he reached into his shirt pocket and pulled out a small leather-wrapped bundle. His hands shook slightly as he unwrapped it, revealing a ring, simple gold with a single small pearl that caught the dying light. I bought this in Tucson this morning, he said. Wasn't planning to give it to you so soon, but I've never been good at waiting for the right moment. The right moment is now, with you, always. He slid off the step, went down on one knee in the dust. Evelyn Hartwell, I know we've only known each other a week. I know this is fast and maybe foolish and definitely not how things are supposed to be done. But I also know I love you more than I thought I could love anything. You're my partner, my home, my future. Will you marry me? Tears blurred her vision, but she could still see him clearly. This man who'd stopped for her in Silver Creek, who'd protected her through impossible country, who'd fought for her and believed in her and made her believe in herself. This man who was offering her not just his ring, but his whole complicated, scarred, beautiful heart. Yes, she said, her voice breaking. Yes, Colt. 1,000 times yes. He slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, like it had been made for her. And then he was standing and she was in his arms, and they were both laughing and crying and kissing under a sky that blazed with sunset fire. We should probably wait a bit before we get married, she said, when they finally broke apart. Let me establish myself as a teacher, let you get your guide service started. Give people time to get used to the idea. How long? 2 weeks? He laughed, a sound of pure joy. 2 weeks. I can manage 2 weeks, though it might kill me. We've survived worse than waiting, she pointed out. We survived Apache country and bounty hunters and Jackson Reeves. We can survive planning a wedding. They sat on those schoolhouse steps until the stars came out, making plans and dreaming dreams. Colt would start his guide service immediately, putting up advertisements in Tucson and the surrounding settlements. He'd hire himself out for protection and courier work, slowly building a reputation and a client base. Eventually, when money allowed, he'd buy more horses, maybe take on a partner, expand the operation. Evelyn would teach, would pour herself into giving these frontier children the education they deserved. She'd adapt her lessons to meet them where they were, would learn Spanish and O'odham phrases to better communicate with all her students, would prove that a woman from St. Louis could thrive in Arizona territory. And together, they'd build a life. They'd marry in the little church in Tucson with Tom and Sarah Jeffords as witnesses. They'd add rooms to the teacherage as they needed them, as their family grew. They'd become part of the community, contributing their strengths and accepting their neighbors' help in return. The days that followed were a blur of activity. Evelyn threw herself into preparing her classroom, creating lesson plans that would work for children of different ages and abilities. Parents began stopping by to introduce themselves and their children, to express their gratitude that she'd come, to offer what help they could. Colt was gone for 3 days on his first guiding job, leading a family of settlers from Tucson to a homestead claim north of Tucson. He came back with money in his pocket and word-of-mouth recommendations already spreading. Within a week, he had 3 more jobs lined up. They saw each other every day he was in town, always under the watchful eyes of the community. Courting frontier style meant sitting on her porch while she graded papers, riding out to inspect fence lines on Sunday afternoons with a chaperone trailing behind, sharing meals at the Crawford Ranch where Mary Crawford beamed at them like they were her own children. The wedding was set for 2 weeks from the day he proposed, and the whole community seemed determined to make it special. Mary Crawford offered her parlor for the ceremony. Maria Gonzalez and her daughters sewed Evelyn a dress, simple white cotton with delicate embroidery at the collar and cuffs. Samuel Liu contributed a feast from his store supplies, refusing payment. Thomas Red Cloud carved them a set of wooden bowls as a wedding gift, each one marked with symbols that meant strength, wisdom, and partnership. The night before the wedding, Sarah Jeffords arrived from Fort Bowie with Tom, both of them grinning widely. "Couldn't miss this for the world," Sarah declared, hugging Evelyn tight. "Besides, someone needs to make sure Colt actually shows up and doesn't panic at the last minute." "I'm not going to panic," Colt protested. "All men panic before their weddings," Tom said sagely. "It's natural. You're giving up your freedom, taking on responsibility, promising to care for someone else for the rest of your life. That's terrifying." "It's not terrifying when it's her," Colt said simply, looking at Evelyn. "It's the easiest decision I've ever made." The wedding day dawned clear and perfect, the kind of September morning when the desert remembered that beauty and harshness could coexist. Evelyn dressed in Mary Crawford's bedroom, her hands shaking only slightly as Maria helped her with the tiny buttons down the back of the dress. "You look beautiful," Maria said softly, "like a true frontier bride, strong enough to survive anything, soft enough to still believe in love." In the parlor, chairs had been arranged in rows, and what looked like half of Tucson had squeezed inside. The rest stood outside the open windows and doors, straining to see. The local minister, a circuit rider who happened to be in town, stood at the front, his worn Bible open in his hands. And there, waiting beside Tom Jeffords, was Colt. He'd gotten a new shirt for the occasion, dark blue that matched his eyes, and his hair was slicked back with water. But it was his expression that took her breath away, awe and love, and something that looked like disbelief, as if he couldn't quite believe she was real, and this was happening. Mary Crawford took Evelyn's arm and walked her down the makeshift aisle. Evelyn was barely aware of the people watching, of the whispered comments and suppressed sniffles. All she could see was Colt. All she could think about was the fact that in a few minutes she would be his wife and he would be her husband, and the rest of their lives would start. The ceremony was simple and brief. The minister asked the traditional questions. They gave the traditional answers. Colt's voice was steady when he said, "I do," and Evelyn's was strong when she echoed the words. He slipped a plain gold band onto her finger to join the engagement ring, and she slipped a matching band onto his. They'd bought them together in Tucson, choosing simplicity over ostentation, symbols that would last. "I now pronounce you man and wife," the minister intoned. "You may kiss your bride." Colt cupped her face in his hands, his calluses rough against her cheeks, and kissed her with a gentleness that made her eyes sting with tears. The room erupted in applause and cheers, people calling out blessings in English and Spanish and O'odham, celebrating this union that somehow represented more than just two people finding each other. The feast afterward lasted hours. Someone produced a fiddle, and dancing spilled out into the yard. Children ran wild, drunk on cake and excitement. Old-timers told stories about their own weddings, comparing hardships and laughing at how much had changed or how little. Evelyn found herself swept from conversation to conversation, accepting congratulations and advice and predictions about how many children she and Colt would have. Colt stayed close, his hand always finding hers, his eyes tracking her through the crowd with open adoration. As the sun began to set, they slipped away from the celebration, walking back to the teacherage that was now their home. Colt had spent the previous week adding a bedroom, installing a proper bed he'd bought in Tucson, hanging curtains Sarah had sewn. It was simple, but it was theirs, a space they'd made together. "Mrs. Merriman," Colt said, trying out the name. "How does that sound?" "Perfect," Evelyn replied. "Though the students will still call me Miss Hartwell in class. Easier that way, less confusing. Whatever you want, as long as I get to call you wife, I'm happy." He pulled her close, his arms encircling her waist. "Thank you." "For what?" "For saying yes. For taking a chance on a broken-down scout who didn't know what he was looking for until he found you standing in the street in Silver Creek, watching that stage disappear. For seeing something in me worth loving." "You're not broken down," she said yet again, reaching up to trace the scar through his eyebrow. "You're seasoned, tested, true, and I love every scarred, complicated inch of you." He kissed her then, slow and deep, and she felt the last piece of her old life fall away. She wasn't Evelyn Hartwell from St. Louis anymore, daughter of a failed merchant, woman without prospects. She was Evelyn Merriman, frontier teacher, partner to a guide and scout, woman who'd crossed Apache country and found herself in the process. The stage had left her behind in Silver Creek. But Colt Merriman had tipped his hat and said, "Ride with me," and she had, and that ride had brought her here, to this man, this place, this life that was harder and richer and more real than anything she could have imagined. Sometimes the worst thing that could happen was also the best thing. Sometimes being abandoned was how you found your way home. Sometimes the cowboy who stopped to help a crying woman wasn't just offering a ride, but offering a future, if she was brave enough to take it. And she had been. She was. She would continue to be for the rest of their lives, however long the desert and the frontier and their love allowed them to have. Outside, the celebration continued, voices raised in song and laughter. But inside their small adobe home, Evelyn and Colt held each other close and watched through the window as the Arizona sky turned colors no painter could capture, as the stars began to emerge one by one, as the night settled in with its promise of tomorrow and all the tomorrows after that. The stage had left without her, but love had waited, and in the end, that made all the difference.